Chapter 90. Go out? Yi was a bit tempted. She seemed to have forgotten that there was another benefit after getting married. It was more convenient to go out than before. No problem. Yi nodded, agreeing with Mo Xiaoyao's suggestion. Mo Xiaoyao was startled when he saw that she didn't hesitate at all. A faint smile appeared on his lips. You said you wanted to draw a portrait for Ali yesterday. Ali, come over and take a look. What do you think of this? Yi walked over in surprise. You're done so quickly. There was an open painting on the table in front of Mo Xiaoyao. In the painting, there was a woman dressed in red standing with a sword. Yi recognized at a glance that the dress and the accessories on her head were the ones she had worn on the day of her wedding. However, the red dress she was wearing was not the heavy and complicated wedding dress embroidered with a phoenix peony. Instead, it was a simple red dress with golden cloud embroidery. There was a golden belt around her waist. The peony between her eyebrows had been replaced by a bright red flame. The woman's hands were dancing. Her expression was bright and dignified, but there was also a trace of arrogance and sharpness. This is me. Yi looked at the woman in the painting in a daze and softly said. The woman in the painting had a familiar face, but it also seemed a bit unfamiliar. However, that unfamiliar feeling seemed to be the one she was truly familiar with. For some reason, Yi felt that the woman in the painting was very beautiful. She was 100 times more beautiful than her usual self in the mirror. Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, the beauty dance of the past, one sword moves the four directions. Li has the style of Princess Qing Yun of the past. I haven't. Yi shook her head. She had never wielded a sword in front of anyone before. More accurately, she did not know how to wield a sword at all. Yi was lost in thought as she looked at the cloud-embracing sword in the hand of the woman in the painting. Mo Xiaoyao faintly smiled and said, I feel that this is the real Li. Yi was silent. However, her eyes could not move away from the woman in the painting. Indeed, she had seen such an expression on another familiar face before. He came and went freely in the rain of bullets, and killed enemies with his bare hands in the rain of blood. That was a completely different life from now. Ever since she accepted reality, she had been trying her best to conform to the standards of women in this era. She also thought that she had gradually forgotten the woman who laughed wantonly in the mud and sweat. But, if she had really forgotten about it, if she had really accepted it, how could she have hidden her skills like this? That day, when Li held the cloud-embracing sword, I felt that Li was more beautiful than I've ever seen her. Mo Xiaoyao seemed to sigh. The image of Yi unsheathing her cloud-embracing sword appeared in his mind. Although it was only for a short moment, it was completely different from any other woman's biting cold aura, and the free and unrestrained heroic spirit of brandishing her sword. In that instant, Mo Xiaoyao thought he was looking at a famous general who had dominated the battlefield. You? Can you give me this painting? Yi asked hesitantly. Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, this was originally meant for you. Ever since the topic of painting had been brought up yesterday, Mo Xiaoyao knew that Li was just joking. But in his mind, from time to time, Yi's beautiful appearance on their wedding night, and the scene of her unsheathing her sword that day in the main hall of the Yi residence. So even though there were many things to do in the palace these past 2 days, he still worked through the night to finish this painting. But, you haven't written it yet? What does Li think is appropriate? Yi shook her head. She hesitated and said, no need. I don't need to take it out for others to admire. She really liked this painting. If she wrote it, what would she do if it was ruined? Mo Xiaoyao raised an eyebrow and then nodded and said, all right, since you want to write it, you still need to sign it off. He picked up a brush from the brush holder on the table and ordered, help me grind the ink. Yi was also curious about Mo Xiaoyao's handwriting. Just from the painting, when Mo Xiaoyao said that his painting was not worse than Han Mingyue's, he was not boasting. But how was his handwriting? Mo Xiaoyao looked at her and smiled, Li's calligraphy is unique. I might have to disappoint you. Yi smiled as she watched him dip the brush in the ink and leave a line of words on the side of the painting. Prince Ding Xiaoyao presents his wife Li Li. Mo Xiaoyao's handwriting was tall and elegant. It looked imposing, but it did not make people feel that it was showing off. Yi Li was very satisfied. She carefully took the painting to the side to dry it and put it away. When she saw the words, presents his wife Li Li on the painting, she suddenly had a strange feeling. She looked up at Mo Xiaoyao and saw that he was looking at her. If she just looked away, wouldn't she seem guilty? Yi Li could only open her eyes wide and look back. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and was the first to look away. The strange atmosphere made Yi Li want to leave, but the painting on the table made her reluctant to leave. And if she left like this, wouldn't it mean that she admitted defeat? She had just promised to spend more time with him. Her mind quickly turned. Yi Li quickly changed the topic. Right, I wanted to discuss something with you. Can you change out of all the white clothes? Seeing Mo Xiaoyao raise his eyebrows in confusion, Yi Li asked, or do you just happen to like white clothes? Mo Xiaoyao shook his head, I don't have a preference for colors. I'm just used to it. But, why did you think of this? Based on his understanding of Yi Li, she definitely wouldn't be interested in what color he wore. Yi Li smiled and told him what happened in the courtyard. Mo Xiaoyao looked at her speechlessly, so you think that because I wear white, she won't wear anything but white? Yi Li nodded, that's what I think. But I don't wear white clothes every day. Although his clothes were mostly plain, it didn't mean that he didn't have any other colors. But it's very obvious that every time you appear in front of her, you're probably coincidentally wearing white. Yi Li shrugged lazily. Oh. Li Li, are you jealous? Mo Xiaoyao stared at her for a long time and laughed softly. Jealous? Yi Li's face couldn't help but darken. She shot up and said woodenly, apologies, my food lacks vinegar. Finishing, she didn't even look at the painting as she turned and walked out. Prince? A short while later, a Jing appeared at the door and looked at Mo Xiaoyao. Sun Mama was right. Prince didn't know how to interact with Wang Fei. Wang Fei was so angry that she ran away in a short while. Mo Xiaoyao gave a faint smile. Later, send this painting to Wang Fei. Qing Luan and the others followed behind Yi Li. Seeing their usually gentle young miss striding away with a black face, they couldn't help but look at each other. The pavilion in the center of the lake was too far from the shore. They couldn't hear what Prince and Wang Fei had said. Qing Xia asked uncertainly, did Prince bully Wang Fei? Qing Shuang's face instantly darkened, what? Prince bullied Miss? Qing Luan and Qing Yu helplessly pulled back Qing Shuang, who was about to explode. Qing Luan's mouth couldn't help but twitch. She had seen Wang Fei's skills with her own eyes. She could easily knock out a strong man without even panting. Just based on the fact that Prince was in a wheelchair, could he bully Wang Fei? Qing Yu thought for a moment and said, let's ask Jean later. He definitely knows. Qing Shuang twisted her mouth, he stayed by the shore like us, what could he know? Qing Xia agreed, he's been with Prince since he was a child. He definitely knows how Prince made Wang Fei angry. Let's go, Wang Fei has gone far. Chapter 91. Yi Li walked quickly towards her own yard as she cursed Mo Xiaoyao in her heart. She must have been blind to think that this guy was gentle. She had even thought that he was pure. That bastard had teased her. Jealous. Jealous, idiot, how could she be jealous over a man she had just met? At most, she liked him because he coveted her things. What's wrong, Wang Fei? Returning to the yard, Wei Mama came out to greet her. Seeing Yi Li's dark expression, she quickly asked. After leaving the young miss she had raised for so many years, Wei Mama had given Yi Li all the care she had missed in the past few years. She was more concerned about her health than anyone else. Being asked this by the Mama, Yi Li felt a bit embarrassed. She knew that she had overreacted. She didn't have the face to say that she had left in a fit of pique after being teased by Mo Xiaoyao. She quickly pulled Wei Mama and said, Nanny, didn't I tell you to rest? Be careful that your little grandson won't recognize you if you keep circling around me like this. Lin Mama and Wei Mama's entire family had followed Yili to the Wang Fu. Yili had placed the capable men of their family in the shops or farmsteads outside to be stewards. The womenfolk were left in her own yard. She did her best to have them serve her as little as possible. Especially since Lin Mama wasn't young anymore. It wouldn't be easy for her to run around with a young person like her. Wei Mama looked at her and said with a bit of sadness, "Young miss has grown up and doesn't like Nanny, right?" Nanny. Yi Li's head hurt. It was this again. But at least she had moved on from the previous matter. Pulling Wei Mama into the room, Yi Li comforted her with gentle words, causing Wei Mama to smile. "Wang Fei, Jean is here." Qing Shuang came in and said. Her delicate face was still puffed up with anger. It was clear that she was angry with Jean outside. "Let him come in." Yi Li teased with a smile, "Who provoked our Shuang er?" Qing Shuang's little face blushed, and she stomped her foot and said, "Young miss. It's all because of that damned Jean. Just because he's one of Prince's people, he's always putting on a poker face, as if someone owes him 500 taels of silver." Yi Li sighed helplessly. "Qing Shuang, you're the one who's being unreasonable. Jean just doesn't like to talk. He's far from a dead face." Mo Jingli was the one with the deadpan face. Jean was at most a man of few words. Even her second brother could not compare to that cold face of hers. Jean came in with the box and looked at Qing expressionlessly. Qing Shuang also knew that the person in question had heard her badmouthing someone behind their back. She turned her face away guiltily. Yi Li laughed in her heart, but on the surface, she looked at Jean with a serious face. Jean, what's the matter?" Jean put the box on the table and took 2 steps back before saying, "Jean was ordered by His Highness to deliver this." "Prince." Prince said that he did not purposely make Wang Fei angry. "Wang Fei Darren, please be magnanimous and do not take offense." He stuttered as he spoke. Yi Li knew what was going on. She looked at Jean with a smile and said, "Jean, who taught you that last sentence?" Jin's face turned red. He looked dazedly at Yi Li and didn't know what to do. Wang Fei and Prince were both smart people. Lying in front of them would always be seen through. Jean silently remembered this fact. Yi Li smiled and added, "Your prince definitely wouldn't say something like that. Also, I'm not angry. I'll take the item. You can go back." Jean silently left. Yi Li opened the box in a good mood. As expected, there was the portrait she had been thinking about. She had just been thinking about what excuse to use to get the portrait back. She hadn't thought that Mo Xiaoyao would be so considerate and immediately send Jean to deliver it. Unfolding the portrait on the table, Yi Li stared at the woman in the portrait and sighed softly. Mo Xiaoyao's voice couldn't help but ring in her mind, "I feel that this is the real Li, so beautiful." Qing Shuang, who was standing at the side, exclaimed excitedly, "Miss, was this painted by Prince? It's so beautiful." Wei Momo also nodded with satisfaction and smiled, "Prince is really considerate towards Mississippi. It seems that eldest master and eldest young master didn't misjudge him." He. Yi Li was speechless. Was there a need for a portrait? In the blink of an eye, it was time to return home. These 3 days, Yi Li could be said to have adapted well in the Ding King's Fu. Even Lin Momo and Wei Momo, who had been worried, relaxed. Only the prince and the princess consort hadn't consummated yet. This made the 2 nannies very dissatisfied. However, they weren't the only ones who were worried and dissatisfied. There was also Sun Momo from the Ding King's Fu. Sun Momo had watched Mo Xiaoyao grow up and knew her master's temper well. She wasn't dissatisfied with the new princess consort. She even hinted that Lin Momo and Wei Momo would think of a way. The Ding King's Fu was harmonious and respected their miss very much. When they returned home, Miss would officially take charge of the Ding King's Fu. How could the 2 nannies be dissatisfied? Therefore, when they returned home, the smile on their faces was like a blooming flower. The Yi family's welcome was exceptionally grand. Not only did Minister Yi and Wangshe bring Yi Shan, Yi Lin, and Yi Rong, even the married Yi Zhen and Yi Ying brought their respective husbands back. Yi Li wasn't curious that Yi Ying would come back to join in the fun. However, Yi Zhen, as the concubine of the southern marquis heir, was able to let the southern marquis heir accompany her back. Once they entered the door and met old Madame Yi, Yi Li was pulled away by her sisters to have a private chat. Mo Xiaoyao stayed in the main hall to talk with Minister Yi and Mo Jingli. Qing Yi Xian, where Yi Li used to live, was still there. The sisters sat at the stone table in Qing Yi Xian's courtyard to talk. Yi Zhen looked at the maidservant standing not far away and then looked at Yi Li, who was wearing a light purple robe. She wore a pearl tassel hairpin, pearl earrings, and a lotus-patterned warm jade bracelet on her wrist. Her expression was indifferent and there was a smile on her lips. It seemed that she had an additional noble aura compared to when she was at home. She couldn't help but sigh enviously. It seems that third sister is having a good time in the Ding King's residence. Yi Li smiled, "Thank you for your concern. Everything is fine." Yi Shan pulled Yi Li and asked non-stop, such as whether the Ding King's residence was big or not, whether it was beautiful, who were the people in the residence, whether they were easy to get along with, and so on. Yi Li wasn't in a hurry. She waited for her to ask enough before she answered some of the questions. Yi Shan didn't get an answer and wanted to ask again. However, she was pulled away by Yi Lin, who was sitting beside her. She could only shut her mouth in disappointment. "I heard that the Ding King's residence has a former princess and concubine. Has third sister seen them?" Yi Shan kept asking non-stop and Yi Ying couldn't get a word in edgewise. She could only sit by the side with an indifferent face. At this time, she stared at Yi Li and asked. Yi Li looked at Yi Ying in surprise and frowned. "Fourth sister, are you not feeling well recently?" It hadn't been long since they last met and Yi Ying's appearance had changed a lot. She felt that she had become thinner and frilier. In the past, when she was in the Yi family, although Yi Ying was weak, Wangshe had taken good care of her. Her face always had an alluring blush. But now, without that blush, her entire person suddenly became darker. Although she had put on some rouge on her face, it wasn't as beautiful and natural as before. Yi Ying's gaze changed slightly and she faintly lowered her eyes. "Thank you for your concern, third sister. I am just a little tired." Chapter 92. Yi Li sighed in her heart. Yi Ying had really changed a lot. It seemed that the ability of virtuous concubine Zhao old concubine to teach people was beyond Yi old madame's reach. "If you are tired, rest more. No matter what, your body is the most important. Without a good body, there is nothing." Yi Li advised a few words before answering Yi Ying's question. "Sister-in-law has been practicing Buddhism all year round. She only pays her respects when she returns. As for Su old concubine." Thinking of the eccentric Su old concubine in the Fu, Yi Li couldn't help but frown and said lightly, "Father Su Fei does not need to meet often." Yi Shan exclaimed, "Then isn't there only third sister and Prince Ding in the Ding King Fu?" When these words came out, not only Yi Shan, Yi Zhen and Yi Lin, but even Yi Ying couldn't help but reveal a trace of envy. In the Fu, there were no elders above, no sister-in-law or sister-in-law, and even no sister-in-law to deal with. It was simply every newly married woman's dream. But when she thought of Mo Xiaoyao's situation, Yi Ying faintly felt that she was balanced. Compared to being ridiculed and sympathized with outside, being wronged at home was still bearable, right? It seems that third sister and prince's relationship is also very good. Third sister is really lucky. Yi Zhen sighed and said faintly. Yi Ying didn't believe it and asked suspiciously, "Is Prince Ding's temper really that good? I heard others say that people with physical disabilities generally have weird tempers." Yi Li frowned and said, "Prince is not difficult to get along with." She didn't know if Mo Xiaoyao's temper was good, but at present, they were getting along very well. Yi Ying also knew that Yi Li was a little unhappy because of her words, but she was never used to lowering her head to Yi Li. For a moment, the atmosphere was a little stiff. Yizhen looked at the two and could only open her mouth to change the topic. In a few days, the palace will hold a banquet to send off the envoys from various countries. Have third sister and fourth sister received the invitation? Yili shook her head and said, no. Yilin smiled and said, the envoys from various countries are here to celebrate third sister and prince's wedding. Even if the others don't attend, the prince and third sister will definitely attend. But how did eldest sister find out faster than third sister and fourth sister? Yizhen smiled and said, this time, it was the emperor who gave our family's Shitzi the responsibility. Naturally, I know some things first. Yishan's eyes lit up and said, then, will eldest sister be going later? Yizhen nodded her head shyly and happily. The crown prince said that he would bring me to the palace this time. After saying this, she looked gratefully at Yili. Clearly, Marquis Nan Shitzi had decided to bring a side consort like her to the palace banquet because she had just become Princess Ding's younger sister. Although she was only a secondary consort, Yizhen now felt that she could stand firm in the Marquis Fu. After all, even the princess consort didn't have a younger sister who was a Jiaoyi and two younger sisters who were Wang Fei. Based on this point, if she could give birth to an heir, she would have a chance to compete with the princess consort in the future. Even if eldest sister can go, you definitely can't go. Yiying glanced at Yishan and said coldly. Yishan immediately blushed and said embarrassedly, fourth sister, I don't think so. Yiying didn't even look at her and said, who has the time to care about what you think? It's just that some people can't see their own status clearly. You! Yishan's eyes were red and tears welled up in her eyes. In the end, she could only get up and run out. Yi Ying's words were too harsh. Although they were directed at Yishan, Yilin still felt uncomfortable. Seeing Yishan run away, she also got up and chased after her. Even Yizhen's expression was not good. Yili looked strangely at Yi Ying and then at Yizhen. Yizhen sighed helplessly and said softly, fourth sister, even if you're in a bad mood, don't take it out on sixth sister. Yi Ying gripped the handkerchief in her hand and sneered, I'm in a bad mood? Eldest sister, ask third sister if she's in a good mood. Greetings to the three young ladies. Old Madam invites Princess Ding over for a chat. A maid from Rongla Hall came over to pass on the message. Yi Ying glanced at Yili and sneered, third sister, don't you want to know what happened to me? You'll know when you get there. Yili shook her head and got up to look at Yi Ying, fourth sister, your temper is fine at home. You're already married, but you're still like this. Do you think Madam can still protect you all the time? Yi Ying's expression darkened and she stubbornly turned her head away and didn't speak. Yili didn't force her. Although they were blood-related sisters, she didn't have the feelings for them as compared to her former cousins. She also didn't have the same feelings for her cousins in the Su family. If she could persuade them, she would. If they didn't listen, there was nothing she could do. When they arrived at Rongla Hall, old Madame Yi was sitting in the flower hall dressed in a festive manner. When she saw Yili coming in, she smiled like a flower. Li, come and let grandmother take a look. Yili walked over and sat beside old Madame Yi. Old Madame Yi sized up Yili and nodded her head in satisfaction. Are you used to living in the Ding Palace these few days? Are the servants in the palace easy to order around? Did anyone make things difficult for you? Yili smiled, I've made grandmother worry. Li is well. The servants in the palace are also very respectful. Old Madame Yi nodded her head repeatedly, that's good, that's good. Then you and Prince. Yili said, Prince is also easy to get along with. Old Madame Yi was in a difficult position. She looked at Yili and said, grandmother is talking about you and Prince. You and Prince, when do you plan to have a child? Prince is not young anymore. Yili was slightly embarrassed. Old Madame Yi pondered for a long time and wanted to ask if they had consummated their marriage. Old Madame Yi stared at her and said, don't lie to grandmother. If grandmother can't tell, then she has lived for so many years in vain. You and Prince haven't consummated your marriage yet, right? Old Madame Yi obviously understood that this granddaughter was different from the others. She quickly gave up beating around the bush and asked directly. She could also tell. Yili thought for a while and said calmly, "Grandmother, you don't have to worry. Prince and I don't feel that we are familiar with each other. It's not too late to get along with each other for a while. Moreover, we are getting along very well now, so there's no hurry." Old Madame Yi looked at Yi Li's calm face and secretly shook her head in her heart. Then, who will take care of the affairs of the prince's mansion? The external affairs will naturally be taken care of by Prince. The affairs of the prince's mansion will be handed over to me after we return. Yi Li replied. Old Madame Ye's expression became slightly better. At least this granddaughter knew how to grasp the power of the prince's mansion. Old Madame Yi was really helpless towards Yi Li and Yi Ying, these two granddaughters. Yi Ying looked smart, but in fact, she was brainless. After marrying into the prince's mansion, she didn't know how to grasp the power of the prince's mansion. Every day, she was jealous of her concubines and made herself look like a resentful wife. In contrast, Yi Li, who didn't reveal her talents, was obviously much smarter. Just by looking at the attitude of the servants who followed Yi Li from the prince's mansion, one could tell that she had a good life in the Prince Ding mansion. But she didn't care about Prince Ding too much. Even as Princess Ding, if she wanted a lifetime of glory and wealth, she still had to rely on Prince Ding. Li tell grandmother honestly. Is it because of Prince Ding's leg that you... Old Madame Yi waved away the servants in front of her and grabbed Yi Li to ask in a low voice. Chapter 93. Yi Li was speechless, but in old Madame Ye's eyes, her guess was confirmed. Old Madame Yi sighed, "Poor child, Grandma knows you have a hard life. But things are already like this, and you have already married into the Prince Ding mansion, what else can you do? Even if you are Princess Ding, you still have to hold tightly onto the prince. The most important thing is to have children. As long as you have children, no one can touch your position. Do you understand? Does the prince have concubines?" Yi Li shook her head. Old Madame Ye's smile became brighter. "It seems that the prince still values you. It's better if you don't have concubines. As long as you have children with the prince first, in the future." Looking at old Madame Ye's speechless expression, Yi Li pondered for a long time and finally understood old Madame Ye's meaning. Old Madame Yi was telling her that even if she didn't like Mo Xiaoyao's disabled legs, she must have children first. As long as she had children, if she really couldn't accept Mo Xiaoyao, she could push him to other women. Anyway, she was the princess and had status, as long as she had children. A man's favor was mostly unreliable. Why didn't she doubt that Mo Xiaoyao couldn't do it? Yi Li had some evil thoughts. "Thank you for your advice, Grandma," Li knows. In order to prevent old Madame Yi from continuing to impart her experience to her, Yi Li quickly agreed. Old Madame Yi was very satisfied with her advice and nodded, "Good child, Grandma knows that you understand better than Ying. Originally, you shouldn't have said this today, but after you become the Princess Ding, you won't have time to come home. Grandma will say it to you now. After a few days, if you have nothing to do, you can pick up your fifth sister and sixth sister to accompany you in the mansion." Yi Li was startled and slightly frowned. Old Madame Yi said, "Shan and Lin are good children. You sisters grew up together. If they can, it will be helpful for you and Ying. Grandmother's intention was for Lin to be more mature. It would be best if she could follow Ying to the Li Palace. Shan's temperament is lively, and your temperament can suppress her. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think?" Yi Li couldn't help but want to go crazy. Isn't this old lady taking things for granted? Even the personnel had been allocated. It just so happened that the Li Prince Mansion and the Prince Ding Mansion had one each. No wonder Yi Ying's expression was so ugly just now. She was already sullen enough when she fought with Mo Jingli's concubine in the Li Palace. In the end, her maternal family even sent her own sisters to make things worse. Anyone would be depressed. Coughing lightly, Yi Li straightened her face and said with a smile, "Grandmother, isn't it too early to talk about this? The prince and I haven't If I rush to let my younger sister enter the residence, what will the prince think? Old Madame Yi smiled and said, "Grandmother didn't ask you to do it now. Anyway, Shan was still young. It wouldn't hurt to wait another 1 or 2 years. As long as you have a plan in your heart, it's fine." Yili pulled the corner of her mouth and asked, "Although fifth sister and sixth sister are born of concubines, the status of our minister's mansion is not low. Entering the prince's mansion as a concubine would be a grievance to them." Old Madame Yi waved her hand carelessly and said, "Marriage is decided by the parents. What grievance do they have? Isn't entering the prince's mansion as a concubine more honorable than marrying a minor official or a concubine's son as the legal wife? Li doesn't need to worry about the two of them. Shan and Lin have always been obedient. They won't have any objections." "I have objections." Yili thought for a while and said, "Li understands what grandmother and father mean. But our family's daughters, except for second sister who entered the palace, have all joined the prince's mansion. This is not good for second sister. This matter. Has grandmother discussed it with father?" In fact, after thinking about it seriously, Yili understood why old Madame Yi was so worried. Wasn't it because of the unborn child in the palace who was still unknown whether it was a boy or a girl? Not to mention now that she had joined the Prince Ding mansion, even if she was still unmarried, Yili had never planned to cooperate with old Madame Ye's wild and imaginative plan. She really didn't understand why Minister Yi, who was considered an official for a long time, would agree with the plan of an old man who sat at home and didn't go out. Old Madame Yi was stunned. She squinted her old eyes and looked at Yili for a while before saying, "What do you mean?" Yili smiled and said, "Li is also a daughter of the Yi family. If second sister is good, then naturally Li is good. But grandmother can't only care about two princes' mansion. You have to know. Prince always doesn't care about the facts. And the support of the officials in the court is also very important. This." Yili smiled faintly and said, "Li doesn't know about fourth sister. But if it's the Prince Ding mansion, grandmother should rest assured that Li doesn't need any help." Old Madame Yi was silent for a moment. She also knew that Yili's words made sense. Not to mention that Yili was confident that she could control the Prince Ding mansion. Then, she really didn't need the Yi family to compensate another daughter. But if Yili wasn't willing and they forced one to go over, it wouldn't look good if the sisters fought against each other. And from old Madame Ye's point of view, whether it was Yi Shan or Yi Lin, they obviously couldn't win against Yi Li. After thinking through this, old Madame Yi didn't insist anymore. She smiled and said, "Li's words make sense. It's grandmother who didn't think it through. Just treat it as if grandmother didn't mention it." Although the Prince Ding mansion had a prominent reputation, but in the past generations, Prince Ding had never participated in the royal family's affairs. From this point of view, the Prince Ding mansion's role wasn't as big as the princely mansion. Yes, grandmother didn't say anything. Li also didn't hear anything. Yili softly replied. Of course, it would be best to dispel old Madame Ye's thoughts. In the future, the Prince Ding mansion would be her home. She didn't want to see any existence that would make her feel uncomfortable there. After chatting with old Madame Yi for a while, the servants came to invite them to eat. Because it was a family banquet, there weren't any outsiders present. Only old Madame Yi brought Minister Yi and Wang Shi, Mo Jingli and Yi Ying, Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li, as well as Nan Ho's heir, Fu Zhao. At the dining table, Yi Li could clearly feel a cold gaze sweeping over her body from time to time. Without even looking up, Yi Li could guess who that person was. Yi Ying attentively served Mo Jingli dishes. Mo Jingli was still staring at Yi Li from time to time with an expression as if someone owed him a few thousand taels. Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li ate leisurely and calmly, occasionally serving each other's favorite dishes. Fu Zhao looked thoughtfully at this side and then at the other side, drinking and eating as if nothing had happened. On the other hand, Minister Ye's expression was slightly awkward and comical. It could be seen that he was trying to make the atmosphere at the banquet more harmonious and natural. But he couldn't afford to offend any of the three sons-in-law. Other than Nanho Shitsi, who gave him some face, Mo Xiaoyao wasn't hard to get along with. Mo Jingli's face clearly showed that he wasn't happy. Cough, speaking of Prince, we haven't seen each other in a few years. Let me give you a toast. In the end, it was Fu Zhao who broke the strange atmosphere. He stood and gave a toast to Mo Xiaoyao, also to Wang Fei. May Prince and Wang Fei have a long and happy life together. Mo Xiaoyao raised his wine cup and said with a warm smile, "Thank you for your auspicious words. I wasn't able to go and congratulate you on your wedding. Don't blame me." He raised his head and drank Fu Zhao's toast. The smile on Fu Zhao's face became more genuine. He said with a smile, "No matter. We've known each other since childhood. Now we are relatives. Before we came, my mother told me to invite Wang Fei to visit the Marquis Fu when she has the time." This Nanho Shitsi clearly knew how to conduct himself. Everyone in Jing knew that while Nanho Shitsi hadn't inherited the title, the Shitsi Fei was in charge of the Marquis Fu. At this time, he didn't mention the Shitsi Fei and only spoke of the Nanho Furen. Chapter 94. Yili raised her cup to return the toast and said with a smile, "Shitsi has written Nanho Furen for me." Yili raised her cup to return the toast and said with a smile, "Shitsi has written Nanho Furen for me." Mo Jingli looked at the people talking and laughing in front of him. He lightly snorted and stood, saying, "Since Fu Zhao has made a toast, then Mo Xiaoyao, I will also make a toast to you." Mo Xiaoyao raised an eyebrow and smiled faintly, saying, "I also haven't drunk with Jingli in a long time. Will I also make a toast to you and Li Wang Fei?" Mo Jingli lightly snorted and waved away the servant girl who came forward to pour wine. He personally poured a cup for Mo Xiaoyao and himself. He raised his head and drank it all. Then he looked provocatively at the wine cup in front of Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao smiled and did not speak. He raised the cup and drank it all. Again. Mo Jingli raised the wine pot and filled it again. The two actually started to drink at the table. Yili frowned as she looked at the two men drinking without a word. Minister Ye's eyes were about to fly out, but no one paid attention. Old Madame Yi tried to persuade him but was ignored by Mo Jingli. Mo Xiaoyao nodded at Old Madame Yi with a smile but did not refuse Mo Jingli's urging to drink. Yili glanced at Ah Jin, who was standing not far away. Ah Jin detected Yili's gaze and showed an anxious expression as she looked at Mo Xiaoyao, who was silently drinking. Mo Jingli once again reached out to pour wine, a jade-like hand covering the wine cup. Mo Jingli's face darkened. He raised an eyebrow at Mo Xiaoyao and said, "Mo Xiaoyao, what is the meaning of this?" Yili's expression was indifferent. She placed the wine cup in front of her. "Is Li Wang drunk? The one who stopped the wine was me. Why are you asking about my family's prince?" Mo Jingli sneered and said disdainfully, "What business does a woman have when a man drinks? I won't lower myself to a woman's level." Yili smiled coldly, "Women also won't lower themselves to Prince Li's level. It's just that this consort and prince still need to visit the Su family in the afternoon. Does Prince Li want our prince to visit the Su family while reeking of alcohol?" One had to know that not everyone could be as carefree as King Li. Especially since the Su family is a scholarly family. They have a long history of etiquette. Does Prince Li want this consort and prince to be kicked out by uncle? Mo Xiaoyao, it can't be that you've developed the problem of being afraid of women after getting married, right? Mo Jingli glared at Yili with a dark expression for a while before speaking to Mo Xiaoyao with a cold smile. Mo Xiaoyao looked at him calmly. There was even a trace of a smile on his face. "Jingli, it's not a bad thing to respect your wife's opinion. Li is right. We still need to visit Sir Su and Imperial Censor Su in the afternoon. You know that Sir Hongyu really dares to kick us out." Mo Jingli was not going to let this go. How could I not know that when returning home, not only does one have to see the maternal family, but one also has to see the maternal family? Stop wasting words. Mo Xiaoyao, are you going to drink I's toast or not? I'm not drinking. Mo Xiaoyao replied bluntly. Yi Li, who was sitting next to him, could clearly feel that Mo Xiaoyao's mood was unusually good. Even when he was talking to Mo Jingli, Yi Li could not help but hear a hint of teasing in his voice. Ahem. Prince Li, since Prince Ding still has things to do, let's not force him. It's not too late to drink when we have time. Fu Zhao helplessly tried to mediate the situation. They had all grown up in the capital and had known each other since they were young. Mo Xiaoyao and Mo Jingli had not been on good terms since they were young. Who would have thought that after not seeing each other for so many years, they would become even worse? This made things difficult for them, the bystanders, to handle. Looking at Mo Xiaoyao, Fu Zhao could not help but rejoice. Mo Xiaoyao's temper was much better now, and he could even listen to Wang Fei's advice. If it was in the past, the two of them would have either fought to the death or come to blows. Jingli. Yi Yin coaxed, don't we still have to go out in the afternoon? Let's treat Prince Ding to a drink next time. Mo Jingli narrowed his eyes at her. He snorted softly and did not speak anymore. Everyone else also sighed in relief. Minister Yi rubbed his aching temples and swore in his heart that he would never let these two sons-in-law drink at the same table again. After lunch, Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao held hands and bid farewell to the Su Fu. Before they left, Su Hongyu called Mo Xiaoyao alone to the study to talk for an hour. Yi Li was not allowed to listen in and could only wait outside the study. The brothers of the Su family, other than Su Qingchen whose whereabouts were unknown and Su Qingze who was ordered around by second aunt, were all in the yard with her. Su Qingyan leaned on the table and looked at Yi Li with a grin as he said, Li Jijia, my father won't eat brother-in-law. You don't have to worry about him. Yi Li rolled her eyes at him in exasperation. Which eye of yours saw me worry about him? Su Qingyan pointed at his eyes and said with a smile, both of my eyes saw it. The usually careless Su Qingfeng felt a rare emotion. He looked at Yi Li and said sadly, I didn't think that in just a few days, Li would become someone else's. If Prince Ding bullies you, come back and tell Sanji. Sanji will definitely stand up for you. Yi Li nodded and said seriously, I will remember. Sanji, don't worry. Su Qingfeng sighed and said, in a few days, I will be leaving the capital. Sanji will tell second brother that when second brother gets married, second sister-in-law will often go to the Prince Ding mansion to see you. Su Qingyan smiled and said, Sanji, you don't have to be so exaggerated. The Prince Ding mansion is not a mountain of swords or a sea of flames. With us here, how could Prince Ding dare to bully Li Jijie? Su Qingbai, who was by the side, rolled his eyes and said, who was the one who retreated the moment they saw Prince Ding? How did the Su family produce such a timid lad that they even hoped that he would stand up for Lear? Su Qingyan's face turned red. Thinking of someone's methods, he couldn't help but tremble and said, CGE, you can't blame me for being timid. It's really someone. Too cruel. Thinking of the two unlucky bandits in the courtyard that night, Su Qingyan went back and had nightmares for a few nights. Now that he saw Mo Xiaoyao, he reflexively wanted to hide behind Su Qingbai. Yi Li looked at Su Qingyan's guilty expression. Although he didn't finish his words, she could guess the gist of it. It was probably someone who did something frightening that scared Su Qingyan. Yi Li didn't intend to delve into this. Mo Xiaoyao was a famous general who had killed his way out of the battlefield when he was young. She didn't expect him to be a spotless and elegant gentleman. After returning to the prince's mansion, Yi Li began to busy herself with taking over the various affairs of the prince's mansion. Just the various account books made Yi Li look at them for 2 days before she was able to figure them out. At the same time, she was secretly amazed that the Ding prince's mansion was indeed rich. Several generations of princes' accumulated family property made Yi Li amazed. When she was almost done, she received an invitation from the palace for a banquet. With the reason of sending envoys from various countries to bid farewell, whether it was Mo Xiaoyao or Yi Li, they obviously couldn't find a reason to refuse. Entering the palace once again, Yi Li's mood wasn't very good because of the unpleasant experience from the last time. The Ding Prince's mansion's horse carriage didn't alight at the palace gates like ordinary nobles. Instead, it directly entered the palace gates. Mo Xiaoyao was wearing a moon-white robe with a silver dragon embroidered with auspicious clouds and eagles. His hair was tied up with a white jade crown inlaid with sapphires. He looked cultured and elegant. Is Li in a bad mood? Yili lazily leaned against the horse carriage and said, "It's nothing. The palace always makes people feel a little depressed." Chapter 95. Mo Xiaoyao couldn't help but smile. I don't know how many people think of ways to enter the palace. Li's way of thinking is very special. Yili faintly glanced at him and said, "Stepping on the bones of countless people to climb up, or being stepped on by others to climb up, is it really that interesting?" Mo Xiaoyao thought and then said with a smile, "The process is definitely boring, but the majority of people can't see the process. They only need to imagine that they have climbed to the top. The pleasure of standing above tens of thousands of people is enough for them to forget everything." Yili raised an eyebrow and stared at him for a while before asking, "Xiaoyao also thinks this way?" Mo Xiaoyao stilled. He looked down at his hand on the armrest of the wheelchair. A long time later, he said in a deep voice, "It's not just that I don't want to be stepped on by others to climb up." The carriage was silent for a while before Yili's voice sounded, "I don't like stepping on other people, but I also don't like people stepping on me. Prince, we've arrived. The Empress invites Wang Fei," a Jin said in a deep voice from outside the carriage. The carriage was gradually coming to a stop. Yili estimated inside that the carriage was not at any of the places she had been last time. Based on the general location, it should be near the Empress Fengde Palace. Mo Xiaoyao tilted his head and said, "I'm going to see the Emperor and can't go in with you. Can you go by yourself?" Yili nodded and prepared to leave the carriage. Mo Xiaoyao pulled her back and said in a low voice, "Be careful. If anything happens, immediately have Qing Wan come out and find a Jin. He's near Fengde Palace." Yili frowned and said, "But you?" A Jin was Mo Xiaoyao's personal guard and the person he trusted the most. If a Jin wasn't by his side? Mo Xiaoyao laughed and said, "You don't think that a Jin is the only person I can trust, right? Don't worry, go. All right, see you later." Hearing him say this, Yili didn't insist and got off the carriage. There were already people from Fengde Palace waiting outside the carriage. Seeing Yili come down, they hurriedly came forward to greet. "This servant greets Princess Ding. This servant is here on the orders of the Empress to welcome Wang Fei." Yili nodded, "Thank you for your trouble." "I don't dare. Princess, please follow this servant." When they entered Fengde Palace, there were already quite a few upper-class women present. Fengde Palace was decorated with a noble atmosphere, but it wasn't overly extravagant. The finer details had a special kind of elegance. Yili couldn't help but feel a little curious about this empress who wasn't famous among the common people. "Greetings to the Empress. Long live the Empress." Yili walked into the hall and respectfully bowed to the graceful woman in the hall. "Imperial concubine, please dispense with the formalities. Sit." The Empress's voice was elegant and peaceful, without any of the high and mighty aura of the Empress as imagined. "Many thanks, Empress." Yili got up and was led by a palace maid to an empty seat at the front. Although Yili was considered the youngest of the upper-class women present, Yili's status wasn't high. But in terms of status, the imperial household was above all the princes, marquises, and dukes in the capital. The status of the imperial concubine was naturally above all the other women. Even though Yili came late, there was still a seat at the front left for her. Yili casually looked around and saw many familiar faces. The first madam of the Duke Huafu was with Hua Tianxiang. Beside Zhao Yang eldest princess and Zhao Ren eldest princess were Princess Xixia and Princess Ronghua, who she hadn't seen in a long time. There was also the beautiful Li Wangfei Ying. At this time, sitting in Fengde Palace, it was clear that they all had some kind of relationship with the imperial household or had titles. Ordinary titled madams weren't among them. After sitting down, Yili looked at the Empress sitting on the phoenix throne. The Empress was wearing a bright yellow phoenix robe, graceful and noble, showing that she was the only queen of the country. When Yili looked over, she happened to see the Empress looking at her with a smile. She couldn't help but be startled. The Empress wasn't particularly beautiful. She was also from the Du Fu, but Hua Tianxiang's appearance was better than the Empress's. But that kind of peaceful and graceful posture was something that Hua Tianxiang and all the other upper-class women present didn't have. "Empress, is this the imperial concubine?" A clear voice came from the opposite side, immediately attracting everyone's attention. Yili looked in the direction of the voice and saw a young girl in colorful clothes sitting on the right side of Zhao Yang, eldest princess. Obviously, her status was extraordinary. The Empress smiled and said, "Yes, this is the imperial concubine. Speaking of which, Princess Lingyun has been ill since she came to the Chu capital. She hasn't seen the imperial concubine yet. Princess Ding, this is Princess Lingyun of the Shilin Kingdom." Yili nodded and said, "Princess Lingyun greets you." With Yili's status, even if Lingyun was a princess, she couldn't be disrespectful. But this princess who had been smiling prettily just now acted as if she didn't hear Yili's words. She impudently looked at Yili before saying, "I heard Brother Wang say that you pulled out the cloud-embracing sword?" Yili nodded slightly and said with a faint smile, "I have indeed seen the cloud-embracing sword." Princess Lingyun wasn't satisfied with this answer. She stood up and raised her chin, saying, "This princess doesn't believe it. This princess wants to compete with you." "I don't know how to use a sword," Yili calmly said. "How is that possible? How did you pull out the cloud-embracing sword if you don't know how to use a sword?" Princess Lingyun stared at her and said aggressively. Yili raised her eyebrows and said with a faint smile, "Princess, pulling out a sword and using a sword are two different things. Who said that people who don't know how to use a sword can't pull out a sword?" She really didn't understand why these princesses and young misses were so insistent on forcing others to compete with this and that. They didn't care if the other party knew what they wanted to compete with. This princess doesn't care. This princess wants to compete with you. Could it be that you don't dare to accept the challenge? Yili stood up, "Princess, you are asking this in front of the Empress and all the madams and young misses in the capital. How could I not dare?" Princess Lingyun said with satisfaction, "Since it's like this, where is your sword?" "In reality, I haven't touched any other sword besides the cloud-embracing sword. The sword that Genom of Gojoseon sent me that day was the first time I encountered such a weapon. So I don't have a sword and I don't know how to hold one." "Pfft, forcing someone who hasn't even touched a sword to compete with you. Empress, can Tianxiang compete with the general in embroidery tomorrow and claim that my embroidery skills are the best in the world?" Hua Tianxiang leaned against Madame Hua and asked. Her voice wasn't loud, but it spread throughout the entire palace. Many people couldn't help but cover their mouths and chuckle. The Empress glared at Hua Tianxiang, but there was a faint smile in her eyes. "You have the nerve to talk about your little embroidery." Hua Tianxiang covered her face and laughed, "Aunt Empress, how can you say that? I just want to have a good reputation. The title of being the best in the world is so impressive." Yili looked at Hua Tianxiang gratefully. Hua Tianxiang winked at her and leaned against Madame Hua, covering her face shyly. The Empress held back her laughter and said to Princess Lingyun, Princess Ding isn't good at swordsmanship, so let's not compete." Princess Lingyun's face was already red from Hua Tianxiang's words. She gritted her teeth and said, "She clearly pulled out the cloud-embracing sword. How can she not know swordsmanship? She's clearly toying with this princess." Chapter 96. The cloud-embracing sword belongs to the Ding Palace. Princess Ding can pull it out however she likes. What does it have to do with you whether her swordsmanship is better or not? Princess Ronghua glanced at Princess Lingyun and sneered, "Are all foreign princesses so strange? Do they all like to force others to compete with each other? You know that she can't do it, but you still won't give up. Why don't you just ask Princess Ding to admit defeat and admit that your swordsmanship is better than hers? You! Hearing Infanta Ronghua's words, not only Princess Lingyun, but also Princess Xixia, who was beside her, felt a little embarrassed. Many people present couldn't help but remember that Princess Xixia asked Princess Ding to compete with her in dancing during the flower festival. The Empress saw that it was going to be awkward, so she quickly said, "Well, let's forget about it." Ronghua, don't talk nonsense in front of the two princesses. Princess Ronghua snorted and sat next to Princess Zhaoran and stopped talking. Compared with Yili, she hated Zhaoyang Princess and Princess Xixia, who were as aggressive and deep as her. She also hated the new and arrogant Princess Lingyun. Noble Consort Lu is here. With a sharp announcement, Noble Consort Lu, dressed in a yellow dress, stepped into the hall with a cold look. Greetings, Empress. Noble Consort Lu was still as indifferent and arrogant as last time. She just bowed slightly to the Empress. It seemed that this noble consort didn't intend to give face to the Empress Dowager or the Empress. The Empress seemed to be used to Noble Consort Lu's appearance. She nodded slightly and said, "No need." Why did Noble Consort Lu come to Fengde Palace today? Many noblewomen present also showed a surprised expression. Noble Consort Lu usually didn't attend the banquets in the palace. Even though many of them went to the palace almost once a month, they rarely saw Noble Consort Lu. Noble Consort Lu said coldly, "I have nothing to do. The Emperor said that Empress's palace was lively, so I came to see." "Empress, don't you doubt it?" The Empress frowned slightly, but still said generously, "Since you are interested, then sit down quickly." She waved her hand to let the palace maids prepare a seat for Noble Consort Lu. Noble Consort Lu walked to Yi Li and asked, "Can I sit here?" Yi Li smiled and said, "If you don't mind, please sit down." Seeing Noble Consort Lu sit down next to Yi Li, the Empress didn't bother to prepare anything else for her. The Empress had always kept a respectful distance from Noble Consort Lu, the Emperor's favorite concubine. Fortunately, although Noble Consort Lu was very arrogant and sometimes even capricious and unreasonable, she restrained herself a little in front of the Empress. Today's coldness and unreasonableness was the limit. At least compared to the Empress Dowager, the Empress felt that she was strangely balanced. Noble Consort Lu sat next to Yi Li with a cold and serious face. The women who wanted to talk to Yi Li, the new Princess Ding, gave up for the time being. They didn't know that Noble Consort Lu never gave face to others. If they got close to her and annoyed her, they would only be embarrassed. With no one to talk to, Yi Li had to sit in her seat and listen to others. Fortunately, she was also a person who could sit still. "I heard what happened in the hall just now." Yi Li thought that Noble Consort Lu wouldn't talk to her. Hearing the faint voice next to her, she was slightly stunned. "You are so useless. Last time, you didn't know how to dance with the Princess of Nanzhao. This time, you don't know how to sword with the Princess of West Hill either. What do you know?" Noble Consort Lu's voice was full of dissatisfaction and disdain. Fortunately, her voice was very low. Otherwise, the rumor that Princess Ding was scolded by Noble Consort Lu at the first palace banquet would be spread all over the capital. Listening to Noble Consort Lu's scolding, Yi Li didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If she remembered correctly, this Noble Consort Lu only admired Mo Xiaoyao and not his mother. What's with this tone full of disdain? "Nyang Nyang, I have no interest in dancing. Also, the Ding Palace doesn't need a princess who can dance. As for swordsmanship, it doesn't seem to be something that the noble ladies in the capital need to learn." Noble Consort Lu snorted and said, "You forgot to mention that your painting skills are ordinary. You even need people to write poems for you. I need to be careful. If you dare to lose face, I won't forgive you." "Nyang Nyang, are you really not Mo Xiaoyao's mother? What are Noble Consort Lu and Princess Ding talking about? Why are you talking so happily?" Eldest Princess Zhaoran suddenly asked. Noble Consort Lu raised her head and stared at her for a while before saying, "Which eye of Eldest Princess Zhaoran saw that I was happy?" Eldest Princess Zhaoran choked and couldn't say anything. Yi Li sighed in her heart. She was endlessly envious of noble consort Lu's straightforward personality. It was a pity that not everyone had the right to be so straightforward. If it wasn't for the emperor's protection, with noble consort Lu's personality, no matter how good her family background was, she wouldn't be able to live long in the palace. Seeing eldest Princess Zharin's speechless and angry expression, noble consort Lu seemed to be in a good mood. She stared at the person in front of her and proudly said, "Didn't eldest princess ask what I and Princess Ding were talking about? I said that since Princess Ding doesn't know swordsmanship, how about I compare notes with Princess Lingyun?" Noble consort. The empress frowned in disapproval. Noble consort Lu didn't care. She only coldly stared at Princess Lingyun and said, "Princess, what do you think?" Although Princess Lingyun hadn't been in the capital for long, it didn't stop her from knowing that noble consort Lu was the most favored noble consort of the Eastern Emperor Chu. No matter what, she definitely wouldn't make a move against noble consort Lu. Regardless of whether she won or lost, if she accidentally hurt noble consort Lu, the Eastern Emperor Chu would investigate and she would be the passive party. After all, they were still on Eastern Chu soil. Just now, Lingyun was just joking with Princess Ding. Lingyun is young and doesn't know any better. How could she dare to make a move against noble consort? Alright, noble consort. Princess Lingyun is just being childish. Moreover, she doesn't know that Princess Ding doesn't know swordsmanship. She isn't deliberately trying to humiliate our Chu state. The Empress lightly said. Her face had a rare resolute expression that couldn't be disobeyed. As a noble consort Lu standing up for Princess Ding was both good and bad. Moreover, the matter of noble consort Lu admiring Prince Ding before entering the palace wasn't a secret among the nobles. What she needed to do was find a suitable excuse for noble consort Lu to stand up for him. She chatted with the Empress for a while. Because it was still early for the banquet, the Empress invited the noble women to the imperial garden to enjoy themselves. Thus, everyone thanked the Empress and left for the imperial garden. Before leaving, noble consort Lu was asked to stay by the Empress. Once they left Fengde Palace, Hua Tianxiang immediately approached Yi Li and said with a smile, "Greetings to Princess Ding." Yi Li glanced at her and said, "Do you have too much time on your hands?" Hua Tianxiang waved her hand and said, "How can you say this? According to the rules, I should at least greet the imperial consort." "So, noble consort Lu didn't make things difficult for you just now, did she?" Yi Li didn't understand. Why would she make things difficult for me? Hua Tianxiang silently looked at her with a compassionate expression. "Li, I've long told you to go out more often, but you didn't listen. Don't tell me you don't know noble consort Lu." Hua Tianxiang finally realized that it wasn't a good thing to gossip about a noble consort in the palace. She moved closer to Yi Li and whispered in her ear, "Before noble consort Lu entered the palace, she was very admiring of Prince Ding." Yi Li was speechless. Even Hua Tianxiang knew this. It seemed that it wasn't just admiring. She nodded, "I know. She didn't make things difficult for me." Chapter 97. Hua Tianxiang walked beside Yi Li and shrugged. "To be honest, I was shocked that she would stand up for you. Judging from her expression, it doesn't seem like she has other intentions towards you. Noble consort Lu's swordsmanship is very good." Yi Li decided not to tell Hua Tianxiang that she was despised by noble consort Lu. Hua Tianxiang sighed, her face full of envy and jealousy. Speaking of which, every year in the capital, there has been a selection of the most talented woman or the most beautiful woman. But noble consort Lu was definitely a real beauty and talent. It is said that the 100-flower feast that year was the most exciting year since the founding of the Chu state. At that time, the two women who participated in the competition were Han Mingyue's top two beauties of the Chu capital. You can imagine the scene. Yi Li agreed. Even if she didn't see it, she could imagine the ferocity of the competition. In the end, noble consort Lu won. No, she lost. Hua Tianxiang said regretfully. At that time, noble consort Lu was only 13 years old, and Su Zuidi was already 16. Even if noble consort Lu is now a peerless beauty, she was only a beauty at 13 years old. So the top beauty of the Chu capital was Su Zuidi. The second beauty of noble consort Lu was painted by Han Mingyue when noble consort Lu was 15 years old. Of course, in terms of appearance, I have never seen a woman better than Su Zuidi in this world. Noble consort Lu lost without complaint. Yes. And then the two of them faced each other. That year's 100-flower feast basically had nothing to do with other people. Su Zuidi took first place in dance, painting, poetry, and zither. Noble consort Lu took first place in chess and calligraphy. Their opponent took second place. After Su Zuidi got engaged, she didn't participate in the 100-flower feast anymore. Noble consort Lu, on the other hand, took first place in dance, painting, poetry, zither, and so on. As long as there was a 100-flower feast, she took first place. Yi Li was completely convinced. No wonder noble consort Lu looked down on her. She was indeed very capable. Seeing that Yi Li didn't care, Hua Qianxiang said angrily, "Can't you work harder? Don't you have any sense of crisis?" Yi Li sighed, "You think too much." She and noble consort Lu were not on the same path, okay? If she really had to learn to be a peerless genius, she would rather play a month-long wilderness survival game. She had no problem drawing topographical maps or gun blueprints, but when it came to drawing, she was only good at drawing embroidery. She had already outperformed herself during the 100-flower festival. Forget it. Waving her hand, Hua Tianxiang glanced at Princess Lingyun, who was staring at the two of them, and asked, "How did you provoke Princess Lingyun this time?" Yi Li helplessly replied, "I'm sure this is the first time I've seen Princess Lingyun. I've only seen the Crown Prince of Zhennan in Xiling before." Hua Qianxiang was puzzled. Why didn't she look like she wanted to eat you? Cloud-grasping sword? This was the only thing she could think of that had anything to do with Princess Lingyun. Cloud-grasping sword? That belongs to the Ding Palace. What does it have to do with Princess Lingyun? Everyone knows that it was sent back from the Western Tomb. Princess Lingyun probably couldn't bear to part with it. Let's go somewhere else. Yi Li suggested as she stared at Princess Lingyun, who was walking towards them. Hua Qianxiang curled her lips. If it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, it can't be avoided. Don't tell me you want to run around the Imperial Garden? Ding Palace's consort. While they were talking, Princess Lingyun had already arrived in front of them. The noble ladies who were not too far away also inadvertently glanced over. "Princess, is there anything else?" Princess Lingyun said, "This princess wants to talk to the princess alone." Yi Li frowned and said, "I don't know what I need to talk to the princess about." Princess Lingyun's beautiful face slightly sunk as she said, "This princess has traveled 1,000 miles to come here. Could it be that Ding Wangfei isn't even willing to compensate this princess for a walk in the Imperial Garden?" Yi Li helplessly nodded and said, "Since it's like this, princess, please." Princess Lingyun gave a soft snort and raised her head as she walked forward. Yi Li gave a comforting look to the worried Hua Qianxiang and followed with a sigh. Young people nowadays really need to be taught a lesson. Princess Lingyun dismissed her maid, and Yi Li was naturally embarrassed to let Qing Wan and the others follow. The two walked side by side along the path of the Imperial Garden. Yi Li asked, "Princess, is there anything you want to say to me?" Princess Lingyun turned her head to look at her and snorted, "You are not worthy of Prince Ding." Yi Li smiled, "Princess, you flatter me. Marrying a daughter to a high position, doesn't this mean that I have joined a good family and found a good husband?" Lingyun said disdainfully, "You don't have to pretend like this princess has already investigated you. An unknown young lady of the minister's mansion, and a woman whose engagement was broken off by Li Wang. She was betrothed to Prince Ding by the emperor, so she has some reputation in the Chu capital. Even if you got the title of the most talented woman in the capital, so what? You are still not worthy of Prince Ding." "Oh, is that so?" Yi Li's expression did not change, and she asked lightly, "Even if I am not worthy of Prince Ding, what does it have to do with you, princess? Princess Lingyun raised her eyebrows, and said with a slightly proud smile, you will soon know what this princess and this princess have to do with each other. Prince Ding is this princess's, Yili, if you know what's good for you, then obediently scram. Yili frowned, and stared seriously at Princess Lingyun in front of her for a long time, before asking, Princess, I have a question to ask. Speak. May I ask, does Xiao Yao know who you are? Yili asked, according to what I know, Xiao Yao has not left home for at least 7 years, then the most conservative estimate is that even if you met each other, it would be when the princess was 7 or 8 years old. May I ask, do you think Xiao Yao remembers who you are? Or, does he not know you at all? So what? I am the most honorable princess of Deling, could it be that I cannot compare to you? Princess Lingyun glared at her angrily. Yili looked at her strangely, if the princess really wanted to marry Prince Ding, shouldn't she have appeared before our wedding to fight with me? Now that we are already married, why did the princess only appear? You have to know that the Prince Ding mansion has never had a case of marrying 2 consorts at the same time, or divorcing a wife and remarrying again. Or would the princess rather be a concubine? If not, even if I die, and the princess successfully marries into the Prince Ding mansion, she will only be a stepwife, and will still have to come to my coffin to kowtow and burn incense on the 1st and 15th of every month. You wish. This princess will definitely become Prince Ding's official consort. Princess Lingyun said angrily. You can think whatever you want. Yili looked at her pitifully, however, I feel that heir apparent Genom of Gojoseon's intentions seem to be different from yours, don't you think so? A trace of hatred flashed through Princess Lingyun's eyes. If Lei Tingfeng hadn't put her under house arrest in the embassy the moment they arrived in the Chu capital, and announced to the public that she was not in good health, and only released her after Prince Ding's wedding. Why did she only come to find Yili now? Yili smiled as she looked at Princess Lingyun, whose expression kept changing, and continued, speaking of which, there aren't many who bring a young princess on a diplomatic mission to a neighboring country, usually, it's for political marriage. I heard that Shi Ling suffered a snowstorm last winter, could it be? There were many things that she just didn't want to think about, but it wasn't that she couldn't understand. She wasn't worried about this Princess Lingyun at all. No matter how capable she was, the emperor would definitely not let Imo Xiaoyao marry a Shi Ling princess to make things difficult for him. Not to mention the Shi Ling princess, even the princess of the northern tribes and the princess of the southern Zhao had nothing to do with Imo Xiaoyao. Only the little princess in front of her couldn't see the situation clearly, and thought that she could get what she wanted if she directly came to her and asked her to back down. She really didn't want to look down on the intelligence of these princesses, but, were there any normal princesses among the younger generation? Or were they really too young? Chapter 98. What exactly do you like about Prince Ding? Yili asked curiously as she looked at the determined Princess Lingyun in front of her. Princess Lingyun gave a soft snort and said, what do you know? Prince Ding is the most outstanding man in the world, the youngest and most powerful general, as well as the most talented man in the world. This princess wants to marry the most outstanding man in the world. He doesn't seem to be as outstanding as you say. Yili reminded her. You're really unbearably unscrupulous. Talking to you makes this princess feel extremely disgusted. Prince Ding must be blind to fall in love with a woman like you. I know that it was the Eastern Chu Emperor who gave the order for him to marry you. How could a woman like you understand just how outstanding he is? Looking at the righteous woman in front of her, Yili reflected on whether or not she should be ashamed. Compared to this princess in front of her, Yang Qianru was so normal and Yi Ying was so cute. I will definitely become Princess Ding. Princess Lingyun stared at her and said resolutely. Work hard, I wish you success. Yili lightly said. I will definitely become Princess Ding. Princess Lingyun said through gritted teeth. Then she jumped into the man-made lake by the side of the road. Save me, the princess has fallen into the water. A sharp female voice rang out in the royal garden. Yili cursed and also jumped into the water. Bastard, There really are a lot of crazy people these days. Mo Xiaoyao, you better prepare to die. The moment she fell into the water, Yili couldn't help but want to curse. Even though she had persisted in training her skills and body these past few years, compared to her previous life where she had to go through wind and rain and roll in the mud, there was still a gap. Moreover, even if this body wasn't favored, it was still a pampered girl from a wealthy family. When she entered the water, she couldn't help but have a slight spasm. Fortunately, Yili was already mentally prepared. She quickly adjusted herself and headed towards Princess Lingyun. She successfully grabbed the struggling Princess Lingyun and dragged her towards the bottom of the water. With a single glance, she could tell that this Princess Lingyun didn't know how to swim. Yili couldn't help but sneer. Very good, should she praise this princess for having the courage to sacrifice herself for love? Daring to jump into the water without knowing how to swim. Then let her experience what it feels like to drown. She believes that in the future she will know what it means to do. Originally, Princess Lingyun didn't panic. She knew that someone would come to save her. But soon, she realized that she was quickly sinking to the bottom of the water. She couldn't help but panic and struggle even more fiercely. Yili snorted in her heart. She clearly felt the movement in the water and knew that someone had entered the water. Yili quickly went behind Princess Lingyun and knocked her out. Then, she dragged her to the other side. When she estimated that Princess Lingyun was about to reach her limit, she pushed her back. It seemed that in an instant, everyone in the Imperial Garden had gathered by the lake. The Xiling Kingdom guards and the Imperial Garden guards who arrived first had already entered the water to save her. She's there. The people by the lake suddenly shouted. Everyone quickly looked over and saw a colorful brocade emerging from the water. Then, they saw that Princess Ding had also emerged. One of her hands was supporting Princess Lingyun. In everyone's eyes, it was clearly Princess Ding who had saved Princess Lingyun. Yili looked at the guards who had discovered their figures and quickly swam over. She smiled at Princess Lingyun, who was still unconscious. Princess, wake up. Princess, someone has come to save us. Originally, Yili didn't use too much strength to save Princess Lingyun, who was dragged out of the water, quickly opened her eyes. However, she realized that Yili was smiling mockingly at her. Ignoring their current situation, Princess Lingyun screamed, "Let go of I." Then, she struggled with all her might. Princess, don't move. Be careful. I don't need you to care about me. Seeing that the guards were already in front of her, Princess Lingyun fearlessly pushed Yili away. Very good. Yili looked terrified as she followed the direction that Princess Lingyun had pushed her away and sank back into the water. When Princess Lingyun came out of the water, the palace maids waiting on the shore immediately put on dry clothes for her. Qing Yu and Qing Xia angrily glared at Princess Lingyun and said, "Princess, our princess was kind enough to save you. Why did you push her?" Princess Lingyun raised her head. As expected, she saw that many people were looking at her with condemning eyes. She couldn't help but be surprised. This was different from what she had originally planned. I didn't push her. Hua Tianxiang coldly smiled and said, "A princess dares to do something but doesn't dare to admit it. Even if you want to lie, you should make up a lie that can fool people. Or does the princess think that everyone here is blind?" Princess Lingyun angrily said. She pushed this princess down. "This princess doesn't need her to save me." The Sunshine eldest princess said with a heavy expression, "Princess means that Princess Ding pushed you into the water and then jumped in herself to save you? In the end, you are safe and sound. She still hasn't come up. Princess better pray that Princess Ding is fine. Otherwise, even if you are the Xiling princess, my Dechu state won't let this go." "Princess, we found the princess." Qing Yu anxiously called out from the shore. In the lake, Qing Shuang and Qing Luan each supported the clearly unconscious Yili to the surface. The people on the shore quickly helped pull her up and put on dry clothes for Yili. Qing Yu held her hand and took her pulse. Zhaoyang princess anxiously looked at Yili and said, "How is it? Why hasn't the imperial physician come yet?" Qing Yu raised her head and said, "Many thanks for the princess' concern." The princess drank a few mouthfuls of water and fainted. There shouldn't be anything serious. However, the princess needs a place to rest. Zhaoyang princess looked around and said decisively, "This place is the closest to Morning Glow Hall. Send Princess Ding there." Everyone crowded around the unconscious Yi Li and led by Zhaoyang princess to Morning Glow Hall. Princess Lingyun, who had also fallen into the water but was safe and sound, was naturally unintentionally ignored by everyone. Looking at the crowd hurriedly leaving, Princess Lingyun's face alternated between green and white. "Princess!" The palace maid of the Xiling kingdom following her carefully called out. "Get out!" Princess Lingyun said angrily. The atmosphere in Morning Glow Hall was heavy. In the inner hall, Mo Xiaoyao sat by the bed with a grave expression and looked at the unconscious woman on the bed. The imperial physician carefully went forward to take her pulse. The eldest princess sat at the side and asked with a frown, "How is Princess Ding?" The imperial physician thought for a moment and glanced at Mo Xiaoyao before replying, "Your Highness, Princess, the princess consort is fine. It's just, she was frightened. This subject will prescribe some calming medicine and medicine to expel the cold." The eldest princess said, "Since she's fine, why hasn't the princess woken up yet?" The imperial physician said, The princess is a woman. She probably choked on water in a hurry and fainted. But it's not serious. She'll wake up after resting for a while." The eldest princess couldn't help but think of how Yi Li had carried Princess Lingyun to the surface of the water and had been suddenly pushed by Princess Lingyun. Her expression became even heavier. She nodded and said, "Go and boil the medicine." Chapter 99. Chen bids farewell. There was only Zhaoyang princess and Mo Xiaoyao left in the room. Zhaoyang princess stood and said, "Xiaoyao, take good care of Wang Fei. I will seek justice for Princess Lingyun for Princess Ding." Mo Xiaoyao nodded faintly, "Thank you for your trouble, but this matter should be settled after Princess Li wakes up." Zhaoyang princess sighed and nodded, "As you wish. Stay with your Wang Fei. I will leave first." Seeing the eldest princess leave, Mo Xiaoyao moved his wheelchair forward. He stared at the sleeping woman on the bed for a beat before asking slowly, "Princess Li, do you plan on sleeping through tonight's palace banquet?" Yi Li's eyelashes trembled slightly and she slowly opened her eyes. "How did you know?" Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and said faintly, "Intuition. Even the grand physician was fooled, how could I know?" Thinking back to how the grand physician was puzzled and confused, and could only say in the end that she was unconscious due to shock, Mo Xiaoyao had a faint smile in his eyes. "Princess Li, I never knew that you liked saving people from danger so much." Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li and said faintly. Yi Li said helplessly, "I didn't have a choice. If I didn't save her, it would have been me who pushed her into the water." Mo Xiaoyao's eyes flashed, "Just now, outside, Princess Lingyun did insist that you pushed her into the water. Outside, she was really stubborn. She could still make a fuss after that." Yi Li exclaimed. Under the water, she had really made a fuss with Princess Lingyun. She didn't think that she would make a fuss when she didn't want to see the grand physician. Thinking about the main culprit of her misfortune, Yi Li's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly. She stared at Mo Xiaoyao's half-exposed handsome face and said, "Speaking of Prince, today's matter is also because of you. Do you have anything to say?" Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and looked at her questioningly. Yi Li snorted and said, "That Princess Lingyun is infatuated with Prince. She even vowed that she would become the Ding King's princess." "Xiling's Princess Lingyun?" Mo Xiaoyao frowned. Yi Li stared at him with a dangerous look in her eyes. "Don't tell me you really have some kind of promise with this princess?" Yi Li asked. How could he kidnap a 7 or 8-year-old girl? Such a bastard, she must beat him to death. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and looked at Yi Li seriously. "I can confirm that Princess Lingyun and I have never met before." "If you haven't met before, why would she cry and make a fuss about marrying you? She even jumped into the lake herself." Could it be, because of the Ding King's position? Yili didn't understand. She didn't suspect that Imo Xiaoyao would lie to her on this matter. In fact, the probability of Imo Xiaoyao and Princess Lingyun knowing each other wasn't high. Logically speaking, marrying into the Ding King's residence doesn't seem to be in the interest of a Xiling princess. If Xiling wants a marriage alliance, the best choice is to marry Princess Lingyun to the emperor. Imo Xiaoyao glanced at her and seemed to be surprised. How do you know that Xiling wants a marriage alliance? Otherwise, why would they bring a princess over from so far away? To visit? Imo Xiaoyao said, Xiling and our Dechu state have always been at odds. Even if these few years are considered peaceful, everyone knows that sooner or later, they will fight. Normally, Xiling wouldn't really let a princess come to Dechu state for a political marriage alliance. In this kind of situation, a political marriage alliance was equivalent to a hostage. Once the two countries fought, no matter if you were a princess or a commandery princess, you could only be a pitiful sacrifice. Yili frowned. What he said was true. In this kind of situation where both sides knew what was going on, even if the emperor of Xiling had no place to put his daughters, there was no need to send them to his enemy. Imo Xiaoyao watched as she leaned against the headboard and frowned, deep in thought. His eyes warmed. Don't think too much. Whether they want a marriage alliance or not, we will know at the palace banquet tonight. When Yili and Imo Xiaoyao walked out, the people who were whispering in the hall immediately fell silent. Clearly, the incident in the imperial garden had alarmed many people. Not only the empress, but even the emperor had come. Other than the northern tribes, envoys from other countries also came. Seeing the two of them come out, Imo Xiaoyao's gaze first fell on Yili. After a moment, he asked, Prince Ding, how is Princess Ding? Imo Xiaoyao calmly said, Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty. Princess Li is fine. The Empress nodded in relief. It's good that Princess Ding is fine. Princess Ding, please sit. The two of them thanked the Empress and Yili sat down. Opposite them, the Crown Prince of Xiling Genom of Gojoseon, Lei Tingfeng, stood up and said in a clear voice, Princess Ding, Lingyun was frightened just now and accidentally frightened the princess consort. Please forgive her. Before he finished speaking, Princess Lingyun, who was beside him, stood up in pain and shouted, Royal brother, I already said that she pushed me down. Princess Zhaoyang frowned and looked at Princess Lingyun. Princess, everyone here saw that Princess Ding wanted to save you. Instead, you pushed the exhausted Princess Ding into the water, causing her to faint. Princess Lingyun was so angry that her face turned red. I have a witness. Princess Zhaoyang frowned and said faintly, I know. Princess just said that your maid saw Princess Ding push you into the water with her own eyes. But, to save your performance in front of Ding Wangfei in Feng de Palace and the situation in the water, it would be hard for people to believe your maid's words. Princess Lingyun shrieked, You are saying that this princess is lying. Princess Zhaoyang looked at her calmly. Even though she did not answer, her expression was enough to say. Lingyun, don't make trouble. Lei Tingfeng scolded in a deep voice. Princess Lingyun was so angry that she started crying. She said hatefully, Fine. If you don't believe this princess, then this princess will use my death to prove it. Finishing, she pulled out a golden hairpin from her head and was about to stab it into her heart. Princess, you can't. Lingyun. Lei Tingfeng quickly grabbed Princess Lingyun's arm and snatched the hairpin away. He looked at this willful cousin of his with a headache. At the same time, he looked at Yili with some suspicion. Even though this cousin of his loved to make trouble, she had never had such an intense reaction before. Could it be that he had really wronged her? Princess Ding, can you tell me what happened at that time? Lei Tingfeng stared into Yili's eyes and asked. Yili calmly looked at him and softly said, I also don't know what happened. Princess Lingyun was talking to me when she suddenly fell into the lake. Then I fell down as well. Lei Tingfeng's brows furrowed even tighter. He looked at Yili with some vigilance and said, You also fell in. Then do you know how you fell in? Yili shook her head. Princess Lingyun suddenly fell down. I was shocked, and before I could react, I had already fallen into the lake. Princess Ding seems to know how to swim. Lei Tingfeng said. Yi Li smiled and said, not really. It's just that I drowned when I was young, so I learned a bit. It's just that I don't have any experience, so. Chapter 100. Yi Li didn't seem to have said anything, but in the ears of everyone present, she had said everything. They even smoothly outlined the entire situation in their minds. Everyone had seen with their own eyes that it was Princess Lingyun who had forcefully pulled Princess Ding to talk to her. The two must have been talking about something unpleasant, and Princess Lingyun had accidentally fallen into the lake in her excitement, bringing Princess Ding down with her. If that was all, it would be fine to treat it as an accident. However, Princess Ding had clearly saved Princess Lingyun. Who would have thought that Princess Lingyun would repay kindness with enmity and push Princess Ding into the water, causing Princess Ding to faint? Furthermore, while the victim was unconscious, she claimed that the other party had pushed her into the water. Instantly, everyone in the hall looked at Princess Lingyun and the envoy of West Hill differently. The nobles of Dechu State already didn't have a good impression of the people of West Hill. Now, they were even more displeased. What kind of conduct did the people of West Hill have? Actually, Princess Lingyun doesn't have to seek death like this. After all, this is the palace of Dechu State. If something happens to the Princess of West Hill, wouldn't it hurt the friendship between West Hill and Dechu State? Although I am a woman, I definitely won't do something that will harm the peace between the two countries. Yi Li looked at Princess Lingyun and said calmly, but I am a little confused. Princess Lingyun and I came from the Imperial Garden. We both left our maids behind. Logically speaking, in that position, no matter if the princess fell or I pushed her down, your maids wouldn't be able to see it unless they were standing by the lake. How did they see me push the princess down with their own eyes? Your Majesty, could you please summon my maid and Princess Lingyun's maids in? The Emperor glanced at Imo Jingqi. Seeing that he didn't object, he nodded and said, "We'll do as you say." Qing Luan and the others soon came in, along with the maids that Princess Lingyun brought from the West Hill. In the end, it was Zhaoyang Princess who asked, "Were you with the princess and the princess at that time?" Qing Yu took a step forward and said, reporting to the princess, "At that time, Princess Lingyun said that she wanted to speak with our princess consort alone and took the initiative to dismiss her own palace maids. Thus, Princess Consort ordered us servants not to follow." The Sunshine eldest princess raised her eyebrows and continued to ask, "Then, did you see what happened by the lake?" Qing Yu shook her head and said, "There is a rockery between the lakeside and the Imperial Garden. We were a little further away and were blocked by the rockery, so we didn't see what happened." Princess Lingyun's maid stepped forward and said, "We saw it. It was Princess Ding who pushed our princess down." Zhaoyang Princess said, "I also know about the rockery by the lake. I used to play in it when I was young. If you were standing behind the rockery, you definitely wouldn't have seen what happened by the lake." "We weren't behind the rockery," the maid blurted out. Zhaoyang Princess raised her eyebrows and looked at Princess Lingyun with a faint smile, asking, "Oh, then where were you at that time?" We were by the peach forest by the lake." The maid seemed to feel that she had said something wrong. She glanced at the West Hill in a panic and reluctantly answered. Zhaoyang Princess nodded, "If you were there, you could have seen it. But I want to know, why did you, who should have been waiting behind, walk around almost half of the Imperial Garden and appear by the peach forest? I remember that there is a small river between the peach forest and the rockery by the lake. The bridge seems to be a bit far." This. In front of so many people and the Emperor and Empress of Dechu State, the maid didn't dare to not answer the eldest princess. She could only say, "Yes. Princess wants us to go there, go there." Zhaoyang Princess smiled and said, "Go there for what? If it was in March, it would make sense to pick a few peach blossoms. But it's almost June now. Normal people wouldn't go there." We. The maid wanted to ask Princess Lingyun for help in a panic. However, at this time, Princess Lingyun couldn't think of any reason to justify herself. She could only argue, no matter how I's maid got there, at least it proves that they saw I being pushed into the lake. The eldest princess was born in the palace and wasn't easy to fool. Her phoenix eyes stared at the maid and said, "Since you said that Princess Ding pushed Princess Lingyun, then how did Princess Ding push her?" At the time, was Princess Lingyun facing Princess Ding from the front, back, or side? Did Princess Ding use her left hand or right hand to push her? Did Princess Lingyun call out when Princess Ding pushed her into the water? If she did, what did she call out? The maid's face froze. After a while, she said, "We remember. The princess back was facing Princess Ding. Princess Ding. Princess Ding used her left and right hand to push the princess. After the princess was pushed in, she was still screaming for help." On the side, Lei Tingfeng's face sunk. He cursed in his heart for being an idiot. The son eldest princess' expression changed and she said in a stern voice, "Impudent. You dare to lie in front of the emperor and empress." The guards that were patrolling the lake said that they didn't hear any cries for help. They only rushed over because they heard your cries. When they saw the ripples on the water, they knew someone had fallen into the water. Why did you hear Princess Lingyun's cries for help? Or is it because your martial arts are better than the guards in the palace? I. The maid forced herself to make up a long string of answers. She was already an arrow at the end of its flight. Being scolded by the eldest princess, her body turned soft and she immediately fell to the ground. "Princess, have mercy, this servant is, shut up." Lei Tingfeng suddenly said, "You clearly didn't hear Ling Yun's cries for help. If the eldest princess asks, just answer honestly. Don't add oil to the fire and say things that aren't true." The maid was stunned. She quickly nodded and said, "Yes. This servant knows her mistake." This servant didn't hear the princess cries for help. Lei Tingfeng turned around and smiled at Yi Li as he cupped his fists and said, "Wang Fei, please forgive her. This girl has been with Ling Yun since she was young and hasn't seen much. She was nervous and must have misjudged Wang Fei. Ling Yun has always trusted this girl. Today, she was frightened and misled by her. Wang Fei, please forgive her." Yi Li looked at Ling Yun's expression that refused to admit her mistake. She smiled coldly. "Shizi's words are too serious. It's not a big deal. It's just, this is the first time this consort attends a palace banquet, and this kind of mistake has really shamed the Ding Palace. Maybe Princess Lingyun's words are reasonable. Princess, don't you think so?" Princess Lingyun snorted and turned her head away from Yi Li. Princess Ronghua, who was sitting beside Princess Xiaoyang, suddenly raised her eyebrows and smiled, asking, "What did Princess Lingyun say to make Princess Ding agree?" Yi Li faintly sighed and said, "This consort is so rude that she has lost the face of the Ding Palace and the prince. Maybe tomorrow Prince will give this consort a letter of divorce. This Princess Ding will probably be replaced." The Empress softly scolded, "Nonsense, this is just an accident. How can Prince Ding be so unreasonable?" Chapter 101. Mo Xiaoyao, who had been sitting idly and watching the show, nodded with a solemn expression. "What the Empress said is right." He tilted his head and smiled at Yi Li. "Rest assured, Princess Li, no matter what happens, you will always be my Ding royal household's legitimate Di Fei. Whoever dares to question Princess Li is questioning my Ding royal household." Xiaoyang Princess also smiled. "Xiaoyao's words are right. Whoever dares to question Princess Ding is going against Princess Ding. You just need to be at ease. Everyone knows that you have been wrong today. Prince, Wang Fei, Imperial sister, is insensible and has misunderstood Wang Fei. This humble one will apologize on her behalf. Please forgive her, Wang Fei." Yi Li lowered her eyes and did not speak. She had a respectful expression as if she was waiting for the prince to make the decision. Mo Xiaoyao faintly said, Things like apologizing should be done by the person involved to show more sincerity. Don't you think so?" Lei Tingfeng was stunned. Mo Xiaoyao wanting Ling Yun to apologize personally was completely slapping Ling Yun's face. He was not willing to leave her any face. Looking thoughtfully at Yi Li, Lei Tingfeng said, Ling Yun is still young. As her elder brother, I have not taught her well. I should apologize personally. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and the corners of his lips slightly lifted. Perhaps heir should teach the princess what it means to be responsible for one's own actions and how to be responsible for one's own actions. Today's matter, can I see it as Shi Ling's provocation towards my Ding royal household? Princess Ling Yun was reprimanded by the person she had admired for a long time. Her eyes had long turned red from being wronged. Lei Tingfeng's heart jumped. If he knew that Mo Xiaoyao's attitude would be so unyielding, he would have directly dragged Princess Ling Yun to apologize from the start. Losing face was better than losing his life. Ling Yun would definitely stay in East Chu. If she offended Mo Xiaoyao, he could still protect her while she was in East Chu. If he left, she wouldn't even know how she died. Today's matter, Lei Tingfeng believed that it was Ling Yun who wanted to target Ding Wangfei. But if it was said that this Ding Wangfei was innocent, Lei Tingfeng would never believe it. What was worse was that Mo Xiaoyao directly raised the issue of Xiling Kingdom's attitude towards King Ding's residence. Although Mo Xiaoyao was currently crippled, the Ding King's residence's power and the Black Cloud cavalry that could cause the entire world to tremble were still around. It would be fine if Mo Xiaoyao was a bit weaker, but Mo Xiaoyao's unyielding attitude made him even more fearful. Xiling Nation did not need war at the moment. Ling Yun apologized to Princess Ding. Almost immediately, Lei Tingfeng made a prompt decision to Princess Ling Yun. What? You want me to apologize to her? Princess Ling Yun screamed. Everyone present could not help but frown. Even Princess Ronghua disdainfully curled her lips. Even if she was known as the most arrogant princess in the capital, she would absolutely disdain to be so rude in this kind of situation. The upbringing of Xiling Kingdom's princess really made people have a whole new level of respect for her. Princess Ling Yun bitterly glared at Yi Li and said, why should this princess apologize to her? I am the most honorable princess of Xiling. Can she accept this princess apology? Yi Li frowned. Princess is not willing to apologize because you look down on this consort. What do you have that makes this princess look down on you? Princess Ling Yun arrogantly raised her chin and squinted at Yi Li. These days, she had already inquired about Yi Li. She was the daughter of the minister's mansion who had been neglected for many years. She was also the famous daughter of the third generation in the capital. She had no talent, no virtue, and no appearance. Even Prince Li could not bear her reputation and abandoned her. She was just lucky that the emperor appointed her to Prince Ding. As for the matter of being the champion of the 100-Flower Festival, in Princess Ling Yun's eyes, it was not worth the slightest attention. Yi Li was just lucky. Yi Li's eyes flashed with a trace of cold light. She kept comforting herself in her heart, she is still young, I don't need to lower myself to her level. Damn it, she is still young. This girl needs to be taught a lesson. If she was still in the army, she would have already been peeled off a layer of skin. Then, is Princess looking down on Ben Fei or looking down on the status of Ding Wangfei? Yi Li asked. You are not worthy of Princess Ding's status at all. Princess Ling Yun shouted. Yi Li pursed her lips and looked at Princess Ling Yun with a smile. Everyone present couldn't help but praise her good temper and self-restraint in their hearts. Then, who does Princess think is worthy of the status of Princess Ding? If you have the nerve to say that you are this lady, then this princess will submit to you. Princess Ling Yun choked and quickly looked at Mo Xiaoyao. It was a pity that the falling flowers intended to fall but the flowing water did not. Mo Xiaoyao only had a faint smile as he looked at the Wang Fei beside him. He did not detect Princess Ling Yun's resentful gaze at all. Even if Princess Ling Yun could announce her intentions for Princess Ding's position in front of Yi Li, she did not have the face to say that only she was worthy of Prince Ding in front of so many people. It was Yi Li who clicked her tongue in wonder at her resentful expression. This girl had never seen Mo Xiaoyao before, but the first time she saw him, she could show such deep affection. If it was 8 years ago, Mo Xiaoyao could say that it was love at first sight, but the current Mo Xiaoyao lacked the conditions to make people fall in love at first sight. Could hero worship really make a young girl this infatuated? Even if it was like this, shouldn't she worship the heroes of her own country? Or was this princess a person without borders? If it was in the past, it wouldn't matter if princess looked down on me. But now, this Fei cannot let the Ding Palace's ancestors be shamed because of this Fei. Yi Li stared at Princess Lingyun as she spoke. Princess Lingyun arrogantly said, "This princess will definitely apologize to a person who is not as good as this princess." Yi Li raised an eyebrow. Previously the princess invited this Fei to a duel, but this Fei declined. Why don't we duel again? If this Fei loses, today's matter. It will be this Fei pushing down the official and will be dealt with by the princess. If the princess loses. Impossible. Princess Lingyun said, "This princess will definitely not lose to you." Yi Li ignored her and continued, "I want the princess to kneel and apologize in front of all the officials and women at the palace banquet." You. Alright, this princess agrees. Before Lei Tingfeng could stop her, Lingyun had already raised her voice. "If you lose, this princess wants you to bow 3 times and kowtow 9 times from the palace entrance to the most bustling place in the capital and then admit to everyone that you are not worthy to be Princess Ding." Yi Li indifferently nodded her head. "It's a promise." Wait. Zhaoyang Princess stood up and said, "I remember that Princess Ding does not know how to use the sword." Yi Li smiled and said, "Princess is right, so we will not duel with the sword, we will duel with the arrow. I believe that Princess Lingyun will also know how to do it, right?" Ha! You want to duel with this princess in archery? Princess Lingyun acted as if she heard a joke as she looked at Yi Li with disdain and laughed out loud. This princess learned archery at the age of 7 and could shoot without missing at the age of 10. You? Can you even draw the bow? Yi Li lowered her brows and smiled faintly. Does the princess mean that we will not compete? This princess is afraid that you will lose too badly. Since you overestimate yourself, this princess will fulfill your wish. Tell me, how do you want to compete? Yi Li smiled in satisfaction and stood up to say to Mo Jingqi and the Empress, "Then I will have to trouble the Emperor and the Empress to be witnesses." Mo Jingqi looked at her and asked, "Princess Ding, have you made up your mind? You must consider it carefully." Yi Li smiled. "Please, Your Majesty, grant my wish. The dignity of the Ding Palace cannot be trampled on." Chapter 102. Mo Jingqi's expression changed. He stared at Yi Li for a long time before he said in a low voice, "Okay, I approve." Yi Li respectfully bowed. "Yi Li thanks Your Majesty for granting my wish." Then she turned to Princess Lingyun and smiled. "Princess, please." "Humph." Princess Lingyun turned and walked out of the hall. Yi Li's smile was calm and gentle. She walked forward slowly. Lei Tingfeng, who was following behind, looked at the woman's straight and firm back. For some reason, he had a bad feeling in his heart. An open space in the imperial garden was crowded with people. Even in the distance, there were many idle palace maids and eunuchs peeking at the rare lively scene in the palace. Mo Jingqi and the Empress brought the palace concubines, as well as the officials and noble ladies who came to the palace banquet to be witnesses for Princess Ding and Princess Lingyun. The imperial garden was unprecedentedly noisy. There were too many people. Except for the Emperor, the Empress, the concubines, and a few prominent members of the royal family, the others could only stand and watch. But obviously, no one cared about this small matter. Everyone was excitedly staring at the two people in the open space. Princess Ding didn't ask for a target. How would she compete? Noble consort Lu sat beside the Emperor with a cold face. Her cold eyes swept over Yi Li with a hint of inquiry. Mo Jingqi lowered his head to look at his beloved consort's expression. He chuckled softly. "What are you looking at? It seems that you like Princess Ding very much." Noble consort Lu frowned and said coldly, "Your Majesty must be joking. I was just a little curious." Mo Jingqi smiled meaningfully. There are not many people who can make you curious. But in my opinion, Princess Ding has no chance of winning. Noble consort Lu raised her eyebrows. She still looked as cold as ice. Mo Jingqi's eyes flashed with a trace of fierceness and darkness. He continued, Princess Lingyun is the beloved daughter of the Emperor Xiling. Since young, she has been practicing both civil and martial arts. In the West Hill, her archery is more famous than her swordsmanship. What's in it for His Majesty if she loses? Noble consort Lu said lightly. Mo Jingqi smiled but did not speak. He turned his gaze to Mo Xiaoyao, who was sitting quietly not far away. His eyes darkened. Prince. Beside Mo Xiaoyao, Qing Shuang looked anxiously at Yi Li, who was preparing for the match. After following her mistress for so many years, how could Frost not know that her mistress had never learned archery? At most, she could only play with the third master when she went to the Su family. How could it compare to the archery that Princess Lingyun had been practicing since she was a child? Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently, don't be impatient. Lei Tingfeng frowned as he looked at Mo Xiaoyao's calm expression. Could it be that Princess Ding really had some sort of trump card? But no matter if she won or lost, there was no benefit to the West Hill. Lei Tingfeng could not help but curse in his heart. Was his imperial uncle muddle-headed? Why did he choose Lingyun to come to Dongchu? Even the Emperor of Shiling's least favored princess was 100 times more sensible than this girl. Prince Ding, this is all because of Lingyun's ignorance. I heard that Princess Ding is the most talented woman in the capital, but she's not good at martial arts. Isn't this competition a little unfair to the princess consort? Mo Xiaoyao smiled lightly. Since it's Li's choice, it doesn't matter whether it's fair or not. Isn't it? But what if the princess? Was Mo Xiaoyao certain that Princess Ding would win, or did he not care about losing face for the Ding kingdom? If Li loses, I will kneel with her to Princess Lingyun. Mo Xiaoyao calmly replied. Lei Tingfeng's heart shook when he heard this. He almost could not hide the loss of self-control on his face. He turned his gaze to the beautiful woman in the field who was wearing the same moon-white brocade robe as Prince Ding. His hand unconsciously tightened around the wine cup as his gaze deepened and his handsome brows furrowed. In the field, Yi Li and Princess Lingyun were both inspecting the bows in their hands. Princess Lingyun's movements were nimble as she inspected her bow. It was clear that she was an archer from the capital. On the other hand, Yi Li was leisurely inspecting the bow in her hands. She was testing here and there. The surrounding people could not help but feel anxious for her. Princess Ding's slender figure and her slow and jerky movements made people wonder if Princess Ding could even draw the bow. Don't mention shooting an arrow, it was another matter if Princess Ding could even draw the bow. Say it, how do you want to compete? Princess Lingyun was already prepared. She raised her chin and looked at Yi Li arrogantly. Yi Li quickly put down her bow and looked up at Princess Lingyun with a smile. 1 arrow for each person. 1 arrow to determine the winner. Whatever. Princess Lingyun held her bow and said, say it, where should I shoot? Do you want to shoot a willow leaf from 100 paces away or a bird in the sky? Hearing Princess Lingyun's words, everyone was even more shocked. They had a deeper understanding of the princess's archery skills. To be able to say that she could shoot a willow leaf from 100 paces away so confidently, this princess was indeed an expert. Hua Qianxiang stood behind Madame Hua and tightly clutched her sleeves. She was worried for Yi Li. Yi Li slowly drew her bow and said indifferently, bows and arrows are weapons. They are not used to shoot leaves and birds. So, let's compete in shooting. After she finished speaking, she raised her bow and pointed an arrow at Princess Lingyun. What? Everyone was shocked. They watched as the girl used a standard but not practiced posture to point her bow and arrow at Princess Lingyun. Are you crazy? Are you kidding me? Princess Lingyun cried out involuntarily. They were standing less than 50 paces away from each other. Lingyun was an expert archer. She could naturally see that Yi Li's posture was unfamiliar, but she had definitely learned it before. At this distance, whether it was her or Yili, the chances of them missing were not high. So, Yili didn't want to compete in archery. Instead, she wanted to compete in courage. Yili said with a faint smile, "Whether it is a sword or an arrow, they are all weapons. Soldiers are lethal weapons. Since this is a competition, we naturally can't harm others. So, we can only trouble Princess Lingyun and this consort to shoot an arrow at each other. Death. Injury. Own. Responsibility. No. She didn't want to marry the emperor and become one of the concubines in the imperial harem. She wanted to marry Prince Ding and become Princess Ding. However, she didn't want to die, nor did she want to experience the feeling of being shot by an arrow. Princess Ding. Isn't this a bit too serious? If something happens. Lei Tingfeng stood up to stop her. Yili turned her head to look at him and said with a smile, "Didn't this consort say that she would be responsible for her own injuries? Moreover, the emperor has already agreed to this consort's competition with Princess Lingyun. Could it be that the heir wants this consort to go back on her words in front of the emperor, empress, and all the officials of Dechu state? How will my Ding King's manor have the face to stand in the capital?" Lei Tingfeng felt bitter in his heart. "You didn't say that you wanted to bet your life first. Of course, if Princess Lingyun is afraid, she can admit defeat at any time." In the end, Yili lightly added in a sentence. This sentence had undoubtedly blocked all of Princess Lingyun's paths of retreat. How could she admit defeat to Yili in front of all these people? She took advantage of her unwillingness to admit defeat to blurt out, "This princess will not admit defeat. This princess will bet." "Very good, let's begin." Yili nodded with a satisfied smile. She didn't know why, but Princess Lingyun didn't dare look into her eyes and looked away in a panic. Chapter 103. Mo Jingqi was also caught off guard by this sudden change. Noble consort Lu looked at Yi Li's figure, her eyes revealing a trace of admiration. "I think Princess Ding has a good chance of winning." The Empress also knew that although noble consort Lu was born in a family of civil officials, she was a rare woman who was both civil and military. She asked curiously, "Noble consort, do you think Princess Ding will win?" Noble consort Lu said, "This Princess Lingyun is not as bold as she appears. In that case, let's do as Princess Ding says." Mo Jingqi stood up. "One arrow to determine the winner. If you miss or dodge, you lose. Let's begin." The imperial garden suddenly fell into silence. The eunuch who acted as the host stood in the middle of the two and screamed, "Princess consort, please get ready." Then he quickly walked out of the field. The two drew their bows at the same time. What was surprising was that the elegant and graceful Princess Ding did not seem to have much difficulty pulling the bow. 2. Princess Lingyun pulled the bow to the extreme, aiming the arrow at the woman opposite her. She had absolute confidence that as long as she shot this arrow, this Princess Ding who overestimated herself would definitely die. As long as she shot this arrow. Suddenly, Princess Lingyun's hand that held the arrow trembled slightly. She clearly saw the eyes of the woman opposite her. The eyes as cold as snow made her heart fall into an ice cellar in an instant. In Princess Lingyun's eyes, Yi Li seemed to have changed into another person. Her whole body was filled with an unstoppable murderous aura and confidence that she would definitely succeed in one shot. She only looked at her calmly, as if she did not care about the arrow aimed at her at all. It was as if she was certain that the arrow would not hit her at all. The more she thought about it, the more Princess Lingyun's eyes involuntarily looked at the tip of Yi Li's arrow. With some despair, she found that if she did not dodge, even if Yi Li was a novice, that arrow would definitely hit her. Princess Lingyun's forehead was already sweating profusely. Yi Li calmly enjoyed the feeling of the bow and arrow in her hands. Although it still wasn't as smooth as the sniper rifle she had been using for so many years, this was her first time in this world having a shooting duel. Even if it was just teasing a little girl, she still couldn't help but feel a little happier and happier. Looking in the direction of the arrow, he could clearly see the unconcealable fear in Princess Lingyun's eyes. His lips curled into a faint smile. Almost everyone held their breaths as they waited for the final moment to arrive. Lei Tingfeng stared intently at Princess Lingyun. Because of the direction, he couldn't see Yi Li's face, but from her posture, he could tell that Yi Li wasn't familiar with this kind of bow. With Ling Yun's ability, she should have a 90% chance of winning. Why was she so nervous? Mo Xiaoyao calmly sat in his wheelchair. His hands rested on the armrests, but if someone looked closely, they would discover that there was something hidden under his right hand. His gaze also fell on Princess Lingyun, but it wasn't on Princess Lingyun's face. It was on the tip of her arrow. I won't lose. Princess Lingyun tried her best not to look at Yi Li's arrow. She secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva and kept encouraging herself in her heart. But her eyes kept unconsciously drifting to Yi Li's arrow. 3. A sharp sound rang in her ears. Lingyun could clearly see Yi Li's smile deepen. Her hand pulled back on the bow, preparing to release the arrow. She had already pulled the bowstring to the maximum and released it out of reflex. Whoosh, the arrow brushed past Yi Li's shoulder and landed not far behind her. How could this be? Princess Lingyun was stunned. What was even more shocking was that Yi Li hadn't released the arrow and she had already lost her chance. She stared blankly at Yi Li's smiling face. She could clearly see that she was silently smiling at her. It's my turn. She could clearly see that there was no smile in that smiling face. There was only coldness and killing intent that was colder than the tip of the arrow. She saw Yi Li slowly pull the bowstring to the limit and release the arrow. Whoosh, no. Lingyun suddenly screamed. She didn't even care about her image as she hugged her head and squatted on the ground. The arrow stabbed into the ground one step away from her. Princess Lingyun stared blankly at the faintly swaying arrow in front of her. Suddenly, she burst into tears. Everyone exchanged glances. Yi Li leisurely put down the bow in her hands. She smiled at Princess Lingyun and said, "Princess, actually, my hand is very sore. You don't have to worry that I'll shoot you." You. Princess Lingyun cried so hard that her snot couldn't form a sound. She pointed at Yi Li but couldn't speak for a long time. Yi Li smiled at her. She only felt that all the depression she had suffered today was released in an instant. Sure enough, teaching a disobedient brat was the best way to put him in a good mood. Good. Mo Jingqi clapped his hands and smiled. This competition will definitely be won by the princess consort. What does the heir think? Lei Tingfeng's expression was complicated as he looked at the smiling woman not far away. He stood up and said, "The princess consort is indeed a woman who doesn't lose to men. This one is sincerely convinced. Naturally, the princess consort wins." Lingyun kneeled down and apologized to the princess consort. Lei Tingfeng made a prompt decision and said to Princess Lingyun. Yi Li's request was to apologize in front of all the officials at the palace banquet. However, Lei Tingfeng directly cut off the second half of her sentence and had Lingyun immediately apologize. This would make people feel that the Xiling princess dared to admit what she had done. Moreover, Lingyun was crying so miserably right now, it would make people sympathize with her. When it came to the palace banquet at night, everyone would tactfully not mention this matter again. However, if it was dragged to the palace banquet, the news of Lingyun losing to the princess consort would have spread throughout the palace. After everyone gossiped for a while, their evaluation of Lingyun would be even lower. Even if Lingyun kneeled down and apologized, no one would have a good impression of her. More importantly, it would affect his actions later. Kneel. Princess Lingyun's face turned white. She never would have thought that she would lose to a weak Eastern Chu girl in the field she was most proud of. Thinking of the promise she had made in the heat of the moment, it was too late to regret it now. She looked at Lei Tingfeng for help, but all she received was Lei Tingfeng's warning gaze. Looking at the surrounding people, the Eastern Chu emperor, empress, concubines, ministers, and noblewomen, as well as the Nanzhao envoy and princess. Princess Lingyun knew that if she really kneeled down, her reputation would be completely ruined. There's no need to kneel. Princess only needs to apologize to this consort. Yi Li suddenly spoke. Princess Lingyun was stunned. She finally understood that there was no benefit in continuing to cause trouble. She was weak in Eastern Chu and her royal brother was not willing to help her. She could not beat this Princess Ding at all. Gritting her teeth, Princess Lingyun slightly bowed and said, "It was Lingyun who was insensible and offended Princess Ding. Princess Ding, please forgive this offense." Yi Li nodded with a faint smile and said, "Princess is a guest, there is no need to take it to heart." After saying this, she turned around and ignored Princess Lingyun, walking towards Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao lowered his eyes and the thing under his right hand disappeared. He then raised his head to look at Yi Li in front of him. Although Yi Li's expression was as gentle and indifferent as usual, Mo Xiaoyao was certain that he saw a different light in her eyes. Chapter 104. Lei Tingfeng cupped his hands towards Yi Li, silently expressing his thanks. Yi Li nodded slightly, sitting down beside Mo Xiaoyao. She tried her best to ignore the gazes from all around her. Princess Lingyun returned to Lei Tingfeng's side in a daze, no longer in the mood to find trouble with Yi Li. Feeling Mo Xiaoyao's gaze on her, Yi Li raised her head, asking in confusion, "What's wrong?" Mo Xiaoyao calmly said, "It was very dangerous just now. If it wasn't for the fact that Princess Lingyun's mind was unstable, if it was any other ordinary archer, that arrow would have directly hit Yi Li's body. At best, it would have resulted in both sides suffering heavy injuries." Yi Li shook her head, shrugging her shoulders and smiling. "There won't be any danger. If not for Princess Lingyun, I wouldn't have competed with her in archery." The reason why she chose archery was because she knew that Princess Lingyun's mind was not enough to compete with a sniper, even if it was only for a short moment. Even though she was born in the palace, the arrogant and willful little princess was protected. There was no way she could maintain a calm standard in front of her. Of course, if Princess Lingyun's hand really did not tremble and directly shot the arrow at her, she had other ways to deal with it. Besides, Prince won't let anything happen to me, right? Seeing Mo Xiaoyao's disapproving gaze, Yi Li smiled faintly. Mo Xiaoyao was startled, nodding lightly. "You're right. If Princess Lingyun's arrow had not missed, he would not have let that arrow land on Li's body." "Princess Ding, have you learned archery before?" Mo Jingqi asked in a clear voice from the main seat. Yi Li stood up, replying respectfully, "Reporting to your majesty, I haven't. It's just that when I went to uncle's house, brother taught me for fun. I've never studied it seriously." Mo Jingqi smiled meaningfully. Yi Li was able to win against Princess Lingyun, who had studied for many years, even though she had never studied seriously. Her talent and intelligence were both very good. Mo Jingqi held noble consort Lu in his arms and said with a smile, "It seems that Princess Ding and my beloved consort are both extraordinary women skilled in both pen and sword." Noble consort Lu replied lightly, "You're right, your majesty." After sending off the emperor, empress, and Gui Fei, Yi Li was too lazy to pay attention to the people who came up to compliment or test her. Together with Mo Xiaoyao, she found a quiet place to rest in the imperial garden. Most people were tactful enough to not disturb the couple, but there were always one or two exceptions. After rejecting the palace maid sent by Yi Jiaoyi to invite her to the small gathering, Yi Li looked at Mo Xiaoyao who had been staring at her. She smiled and said, "Prince, what's wrong?" Mo Xiaoyao held the teacup in one hand, casually playing with it. He said, "Li is very talented in martial arts. It seems that her foundation is also good." Yi Li did not mind that her skills were known by Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao was a very cautious and seemingly gentle person, but he was very guarded. It was almost impossible for her not to be known by him after living in the same manner for a long time. Yi Li did not plan to hide it. She needed space to train herself, and even learn more powerful things to strengthen her abilities. Meeting Mo Xiaoyao's eyes, Yi Li smiled innocently. If Prince thinks it's not bad, then it should be really not bad. Mo Xiaoyao clearly did not intend to get to the bottom of the matter. He smiled and shook his head. If Lily likes, there are some martial arts manuals in the study. You can take them to read. Seeing Yi Li's eyes light up at his words, Mo Xiaoyao continued with a smile, since Li says she doesn't know swordsmanship, I can find someone to teach Li. Is that really okay? The better Li can protect herself, the more assured I will be. Why not? Mo Xiaoyao said with a smile. Yi Li instantly felt that marrying a wealthy, understanding, and open-minded husband was too fortunate. Great, thank you, Yi Li said with a smile. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head lightly. We are family. If you need anything, you can tell me directly. There is no need to thank me. Seeing the sincere smile on Yi Li's face that he had never seen before, Mo Xiaoyao couldn't help but feel that finding someone to teach Li swordsmanship was not a bad idea. The palace banquet in the evening proceeded in a strange atmosphere. When Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao entered the hall together, all eyes in the hall immediately focused on her. Clearly, the competition in the Imperial Garden in the afternoon had caused Yi Li to be in the limelight. In just one short afternoon, not only had the officials in the Imperial Garden appeared, but everyone at the banquet had heard of what had happened in the afternoon. Seeing Murong Ting winking at her while sitting with Qin Zheng and Su Qingfeng's undisguised praise, Yi Li had no doubt that this matter had spread throughout the capital. But she didn't know how it would spread. Would they say that Princess Ding was skilled in both the pen and the sword, or that Princess Ding was so valiant that she scared the arrogant Princess of Xiling to tears? Thinking of the latter possibility, Yi Li couldn't help but lower her head and laugh. The so-called palace banquet was nothing more than good wine and food, singing and dancing to celebrate peace. Yi Li listlessly listened to the polite exchanges between the emperor and the foreign envoys, or the whispers of the officials at the side. She saw some dishes that she liked to eat. In any case, she could not expect to be full from the food at this banquet. She could just wait until she returned to the food to eat a midnight snack. Until a bright red dress appeared in the middle of the singing and dancing in the hall, Yi Li looked at the beautiful dancing in the hall with some surprise. She tilted her head and asked, "Why is Yaoji here?" Mo Xiaoyao chuckled softly and said, "They must have specially invited her to perform in the palace. Yaoji was born in the musical house and her dancing skills are the best in the capital. Last year at the Empress Dowager's birthday, she was specially invited to perform in the palace." Yi Li raised her eyebrows and asked, "Prince, what do you think?" Mo Xiaoyao said, "Of course it's good." "What do you think, Li?" Yi Li looked back for a long time and nodded, "It's indeed good." She had heard of Yaoji's reputation. It could be said that she was a wonderful woman in the capital. She was born in the musical house and amazed the capital with her zither skills and dancing skills. She became the owner of the #1 brothel in the capital before the age of 25. She had contacts with many dignitaries in the capital. It was said that Mu Yang, the heir of Marquis Mu Yang, was her guest. Young Master Feng San also called her a friend. Since ancient times, only such a woman could live in such a carefree and unrestrained manner in such an era. The dance of the #1 prostitute in the capital was naturally amazing. At a glance, at least 70% of the men present showed a covetous look. And the women also showed a look of jealousy and resentment. Naturally, there were also people who looked at him with pure admiration, but only a very small number of people. After the dance, Yaoji quickly disappeared outside the hall, leaving only a touch of fragrance that made people reluctant to leave. Looking at the bustling people in the hall with different expressions, Yi Li only felt more bored. After telling Mo Xiaoyao that she wanted to go out to get some fresh air, Yi Li quietly left the hall with Qing Luan and Qing Shuang. The night wind outside the hall blew gently, gradually dispersing the smell of rouge and wine from the hall. Yi Li took a deep breath. Ignoring the music in the hall, the imperial palace was exceptionally quiet at night. Walking slowly on the quiet path, Yi Li's restless mood gradually calmed down. When she was about to sit in the pavilion in front, a strange palace maid blocked their way. "Greetings, Princess Ding." Chapter 105. Qing Luan stood in front of Yi Li vigilantly and asked, "Who are you?" The palace maid bowed and said, "This servant is Yi Zhaoyi's palace maid." Yi Jiaoyi invites Ding Wangfei to Yaohua Palace for a chat. Yi Yu was pregnant, so she did not attend the banquet in the evening. In the afternoon, she sent a palace maid to invite, but Yi Li declined her invitation on the spot. Yi Li naturally knew Yi Yu's thoughts, but even if they were sisters, she did not intend to let Yi Yu and the Yi family use her. The main reason was that Yi Yu's plans and ideas were too unreliable. If she was careful and knew her place, she might be able to give birth to the child safely and have someone to rely on in the future. Even if she had only seen her a few times, Yi Li still felt that the pregnant Yi Yu was not as pampered as the Yi family thought. This consort is a little tired today. Tell Yi Jiaoyi that if there is anything, this consort will go to the palace to pay respects in 2 days and then talk with her. Let's forget about it today. The palace maid looked a little anxious and said, "Forgive me, Wang Fei. Jiaoyi Nyang does have something urgent to discuss with Wang Fei." Yi Li said lightly, "Even if there is something urgent, I'm afraid it's useless to discuss it with this consort. By the way, Yi Jiaoyi's mother, Wang Furen, is also in the hall at this time. Why don't this consort ask someone to help you invite her out? What do you think?" Wang Fei, Jiaoyi Nyang only asks Wang Fei to go and have an audience. The palace maid said. When she said the word, have an audience, there was a hint of coercion. Yi Li's face sank, and she sneered and said indifferently, "I don't know that a Jiaoyi needs I to go and have an audience with her in the middle of the night." The word, have an audience, was emphasized. The status of Ding Wangfei was very honorable. Even in the palace, she only needed to bow to the Empress and Empress Dowager. The Gui Fei only received half a bow. Not to mention a mere Jiaoyi. If they really met, Yi Yu would have to bow to Yi Li to show respect to the Ding Wangfu. This. Nubi misspoke, Wang Fei, please forgive me. Yi Jiaoyi does have an urgent matter. Please, Wang Fei, for the sake of Jiaoyi's sister, go there. Yi Li looked suspiciously at the palace maid and slowly said, "Speaking of which, this consort has been to Yaohua Palace before. You seem a little unfamiliar." The palace maid forced a smile and said, "This servant's appearance is average. Wang Fei might not remember me." Yi Li shook her head and said, "That's not right. This consort is sure that you are not one of Yi Jiaoyi's 6 senior palace maids and 8 palace maids in the inner palace. Is it possible that Yi Jiaoyi will send a sweeping maid to invite this consort?" The palace maid panicked and turned to leave. Yi Li winked at Qing Luan. Qing Luan stepped forward and effortlessly gave her a chop on the back of her neck. The palace maid's body went limp and fell to the ground. "Princess consort." Qing Yu frowned and looked up at Yi Li, waiting for instructions. Yi Li frowned slightly and suddenly turned to look at the flowers on the side of the road. "Who is it?" "Princess Ding." A slender figure came out. Under the moonlight, the enchanting face added a sense of calmness. "Miss Yaoji." Yi Li said, "Why are you here?" Yaoji smiled sweetly and said, "I don't dare to call myself Mississippi. Princess Ding can call me Yaoji." Yaoji came forward and glanced at the palace maid who was unconscious on the ground. She raised her eyebrows and smiled, "Princess Ding, this is?" Yi Li smiled and said, "Didn't Miss Yaoji hear it just now?" "It's nothing. There are always a few strange things in the palace." She waved her hand and a black shadow appeared behind Yi Li like a ghost. "Princess consort." Yi Li pointed to the palace maid on the ground and said, "Take her away. Don't scare her." The black shadow nimbly picked her up and disappeared into the night after a few leaps. "I heard from Feng San that Princess Ding is straightforward. Seeing you today, you really live up to your reputation." Yaoji smiled and said, "Young Master Feng San has mentioned me to Miss." She remembered that she wasn't familiar with the famous young Master Feng San. Yaoji covered her mouth and smiled, her eyes shining. "Feng San has a high opinion of Princess Consort. Yaoji has always admired his taste. It is a blessing of 3 lifetimes to see Princess Consort today." Yi Li lowered her eyes and smiled, "It is Yaoji's fortune to see Miss Yaoji dance. I will keep what happened just now a secret for Princess Consort." Yaoji blinked her eyes and asked with a bit of naughtiness on her enchanting face. Yi Li smiled and said, "Thank you. Why is Miss still here so late?" Yaoji sighed helplessly and said, "Some people and things are too annoying. I just want to find a place to hide. I didn't think I would be fated to meet Princess Consort." Yi Li understood. Yaoji was beautiful and skilled. There must be many people present who were lustful. But those who dared to pester in the imperial palace weren't simple characters. "How about I send someone to escort Miss out of the palace?" Yaoji showed a grateful expression and said, "Thank you, Princess Consort. It's nothing." Turning back to give some orders to Qingyu, Yi Li bid farewell to Yaoji and returned to the hall filled with singing and dancing. Mo Xiaoyao saw her return and gave her a questioning look. Yi Li shook her head to express her helplessness. Walking to Mo Xiaoyao's side, she sat down and told him about what happened in the imperial garden in a low voice. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said, "I will send someone to investigate later. Li should stay with me tonight." Yi Li nodded indifferently. Only then did she realize that the atmosphere in the hall seemed to be stranger than when she left. The original singing and dancing had long stopped. Everyone's eyes were faintly looking in the direction of the envoys from West Hill and Nanzhao. Even Yi Li's quiet entrance didn't attract much attention. Hua Tianxiang gave Yi Li a strange smile and pointed her chin in the direction of West Hill. Yi Li looked over and saw that Princess Lingyun of West Hill was crying with red eyes. Today was obviously not Princess Lingyun's lucky day. She was crying again after such a short time. "What's wrong?" Yi Li asked in a low voice. Mo Xiaoyao smiled coldly and said, "The Crown Prince of Genom of Gojoseon said that West Hill and Dechu State wanted to marry." Before he finished, Princess Lingyun objected. In the end, the emperor agreed to marry West Hill, but Princess Lingyun wouldn't enter the palace. And then Nanzhao sent the king of Nanzhao's letter of credence, expressing his willingness to marry Princess Xixia into Dechu State. The emperor's meaning is for Princess Xixia to enter the palace and Princess Lingyun to Prince Li. Yi Li quickly glanced at Yi Ying, who was sitting beside Mo Jingli. As expected, she was staring at Princess Lingyun with a dark expression. On Nanzhao's side, Princess Xixia's expression was also very ugly. Mo Jingli's expression was also clearly ugly. He gloomily stared at the aggrieved Princess Lingyun. Yi Li looked thoughtfully at Mo Jingqi, who was clearly very satisfied with her arrangements. For a moment, she didn't understand what the emperor was planning. Was it purely because Princess Lingyun had angered him that he was marrying her to Prince Li? But Princess Xixia had been in the Chu capital for several months. It was impossible that Mo Jingqi didn't know about the rumors about Princess Xixia and Mo Jingli. Chapter 106. The emperor will not allow Jingli to have any contact with Nanzhao. Even without Princess Lingyun, the emperor will not marry Princess Xixia to him. Seeming to understand Yi Li's doubts, Mo Xiaoyao said faintly beside her, "Nanzhao is mostly barbarians. It is said that the country is small and the people are weak, but their customs are extremely valiant. It is only because there are too few people that it is difficult for them to have any influence." Yi Li said softly, "The emperor does not wish for Li Wang to have any relationship with Nanzhao. But Xi Ling seems to be more powerful than Nanzhao." Mo Xiaoyao laughed softly, "Xi Ling and the Dechu state are enemies. Unless Mo Jingli commits treason, Xi Ling will not give him any benefits. Besides, the emperor does not wish for a prince with Xi Ling blood to appear among the imperial heirs." Yi Li suddenly understood and looked sympathetically at Mo Jingli. It seems that this younger brother of the emperor did not make his older brother the emperor feel at ease. Mo Xiaoyao laughed softly, "Li, your heart is too soft. There has never been a person without ambition in the imperial family." Yi Li was startled and carefully considered Mo Xiaoyao's words. Looking at Mo Jingli, her gaze became more thoughtful. But, did Mo Jingli's brain really have the ability to think of such a complicated matter? Or was he pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger? Returning to the Ding Palace, Yili couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. Spending half a day in the palace was more tiring than spending a month in total. After bidding farewell to Mo Xiaoyao, Yili returned to her own courtyard. Mother Lin and Mother Wei immediately led people to welcome her. It was clear that what happened in the palace in the afternoon had already been sent back to the palace. The two mother servants worriedly scanned Yili from head to toe. Only after confirming that she was safe and sound did they relax. Yili had no choice but to ask for a midnight snack to fill her stomach. Mother Lin waved her hand and had someone bring over a bowl of chicken porridge that had obviously been prepared earlier. Yili looked at the chicken porridge in front of her, which was enough for 3 people. Nanny, although I am very hungry, I can't eat so much all of a sudden. Wei Mama glanced at her with dissatisfaction and said, Princess, do you think you are the only one who is hungry? Yili blinked blankly. Qing Luan and the others had already gone down to eat. Wei Mama's face was full of disappointment as she stuffed the chicken porridge and the tray into her hands, saying, Prince has gone to the study. Wang Fei should send it over to eat with the prince. There's no need for that. I'll get someone to pass it to Ah Jin. My lady. Mother Lin sternly stared at Yili and said, You are Prince's wife. How can you let someone else do something like delivering supper? Did Erfuren forget to call you a wife when you were in the Su family? Seeing Mother Lin's expression that was about to lecture her, Yili hurriedly picked up the porridge and said, Nanny, I know. I'll send it over to Prince. Without waiting for Mother Lin to respond, she ran out with the chicken porridge. Yili felt that she had been wronged. The 2 nannies were very naggy, but compared to the nanny, Yili was more afraid of this Mother Lin who followed her mother. As long as she opened her mouth, she would quote the classics, explain the reasons, and lower her head to admit her mistake. A normal person would not be able to withstand this kind of verbal and mental attack. Helplessly, she walked in the corridors of the Wang Fu with the midnight snack. The Yahuan behind her also tactfully followed at a distance that was not too far or too close. Mo Xiaoyao still lived in the courtyard he lived in before the wedding, right next to Yili's courtyard. So before Yili could finish cursing in her heart, she was already standing outside Mo Xiaoyao's study. Just as she was about to knock, Mo Xiaoyao's voice came from inside, Is it Li? Come in. Pushing the door open, Mo Xiaoyao was writing something under the candlelight. Seeing Yili come in, he raised his head to look at her and asked, Why haven't you rested yet? Yili walked over and put the things in her hands to the side, asking, Did I disturb you? Mo Xiaoyao shook his head. Looking at the things on the table, he raised an eyebrow and smiled, You came to deliver the midnight snack? For some reason, Yili's face became slightly hot. She pretended to be calm and asked, What? I can't deliver the midnight snack to you. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and put down the pen in his hands, smiling, I'm just curious why Li would take the initiative to deliver the midnight snack to me. And, no wonder no one thought to send me food even though I've been back for so long. As expected, after marrying a Wang Fei, other people don't care. Yili helplessly rolled her eyes at him and said, Are you going to eat or not? Mo Xiaoyao nodded, Wang Fei personally delivered it, how can I not eat? The two sat down at the table. Yili took 2 bowls and poured a bowl of porridge for each of them. She first handed a bowl to Mo Xiaoyao. Even though the 2 of them had eaten together almost every day, it was the first time they ate the midnight snack together. As they ate the porridge, Mo Xiaoyao thought and said, If you don't have anything to do tomorrow, how about accompanying me to see De Sa? Yili nodded and said, It's been so long, we should go see De Sa. I hope De Sa won't blame us. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head, De Sa won't care about this. Do I need to prepare anything? Yili asked. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head, We're just going to see De Sa. Thinking about that sister-in-law she had never met, Yili could only sigh inside. For a woman at her most beautiful age to let her life wither away, it really made people sigh. How did you deal with the palace maid tonight? Thinking, Yili asked about the palace maid who had blocked the way in the palace. Mo Xiaoyao said with a frown, That wasn't a palace maid. She wasn't? Yi Li was shocked. When had the imperial palace become a place where outsiders could come and go as they pleased? Was the emperor able to sleep at night? Mo Xiaoyao said with a smile, she wasn't a palace maid registered in the palace, but that doesn't mean she isn't a member of the palace. There are some capable people in the palace who always have a few hidden cards in their hands. But that palace maid didn't seem to have any outstanding areas. Mo Xiaoyao said faintly, sometimes, it's people like this who don't have any outstanding areas that are the trump cards. Can't you find out who she is? She's a death warrior. Mo Xiaoyao said. Yi Li understood. If a death warrior failed the mission, they would die, so naturally, she couldn't find out anything. But those who can have such a death warrior in the palace don't know. So, Li, if you must enter the palace in the future, remember to be careful. I know. Yi Li nodded. She also didn't have the hobby of seeking death. The previous Princess Ding Wenshi didn't live in the Ding King's residence. As early as the second year after Mo Xiaowen's death, Wenshi moved to the Wuyuan nunnery outside the city to cultivate. Mo Xiaowen's 2 concubines also moved with her. Ever since she moved to the Wuyuan nunnery, other than the anniversary of Mo Xiaowen's death every year, Wenshi had never returned to the Ding King's residence. In the past few years, Mo Xiaoyao had also been in seclusion because of many reasons, so although he respected this sister-in-law, he wasn't familiar with her. Because she had obtained Mo Xiaoyao's approval, Yi Li woke up early to do some training openly. Then, she accompanied Mo Xiaoyao to have breakfast together. Both of them then took a carriage to the Wuyuan nunnery outside the city. Chapter 107. Wuyuan nunnery was located on a beautiful hill on the outskirts of the capital. It was also the family temple of the Ding Kingdom. Therefore, there were no pilgrims or tourists who came to offer incense. It was very peaceful and pleasant on the way. As soon as they entered the nunnery, they could smell the lingering scent of sandalwood in the air. Yi Li wrinkled her nose as she was not used to it. Mo Xiaoyao looked at her, "What's wrong?" Yi Li was a little embarrassed as she whispered, "I don't believe in Buddha." If she went in later, she could not decide whether to pray or not. It was meaningless for a person who did not believe to pray in front of Buddha. It would not be polite in other people's eyes. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly, "No wonder I have never seen Li go out of the capital to offer incense." In the Chu capital, regardless of whether it was a young lady from a noble family or a pretty girl from a small family, they loved to go to the big temples and nunneries in the capital to offer incense or ask for lots. Some asked for everything to go smoothly, some asked for their husband. But it seemed that they had never heard of the Yi family's third young lady going to the temple to ask for lots to offer incense. Yi Li lowered her eyebrows and said, "Since I don't believe in Buddha, how can I ask for his protection? If Buddha is really spiritual, how can she be so busy with so many good men and women?" Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and looked at Yi Li with a smile. "So, Li still believes in herself more?" Yi Li raised her head and smiled brightly, "If I can't even believe in myself, who else can I believe in this world?" Mo Xiaoyao nodded in agreement, "Good, I also don't believe in Buddha. Li can do as she pleases." Not long after, a little nun came out from inside to bring the two of them in. Wenshi was a very gentle woman. Although her appearance was not very outstanding, the calm and peaceful expression between her eyebrows added a unique flavor to her appearance. Even the gray monk robe could not hide the gentleness and grace of a scholarly family. Seeing the two of them come in, her calm eyes did not have any ripples. It was obvious that her heart was as still as water, or it could be said that her heart was withered. Xiaoyao greets sister-in-law. Mo Xiaoyao pulls Yi Li forward and says to one, "Sister-in-law, this is Li Li." Yi Li went forward and bowed respectfully. "Greetings, sister-in-law." Wenshi's gaze fell on Mo Xiaoyao's wheelchair and face, and then quickly turned to Yi Li. A trace of sadness flashed through her calm eyes. She said softly, "Forget it. Sister-in-law, come and have a seat." Yi Li thanked Madame Wen and sat down beside her. Madame Wen pulled her to have a look. She picked up an old brocade box and handed it to her. She said, "My sister-in-law is not a worldly person. I don't have a gift for you. This was given to me by Prince, your eldest brother, when I had just married into the Ding King's manor. He said that it was left behind by his imperial mother. Keep it." This. Although the brocade box looked old, its surface was very smooth. It could be seen that someone often took it out to wipe it. This should be a souvenir that one sure kept. Madame Wen smiled faintly and shook her head. "Keep it. I don't need these now." Yi Li no longer refused. She put away the brocade box and said, "Thank you, sister-in-law." Madame Wen looked at Yi Li and said, "Your eldest brother only has Heir D as a brother. As a sister-in-law, I am of no use. In the future, sister-in-law and Heir D need to support each other and live a good life." Yi Li understood that Madame Wen was talking about the change in the Ding King's manor. She did not stay in the Ding King's manor to manage the affairs for Mo Xiaoyao. Instead, she left the seriously injured and disabled Mo Xiaoyao and left the manor to cultivate. Yi Li did not think that Madame Wen was wrong. At that time, she was a girl who was not even 20 years old. She was not even a girl that could be cultivated by a noble family. When her husband suddenly passed away and the only bloodline in the manor was seriously injured and disabled, a woman who was not strong enough could not support the entire Ding King's manor. "Thank you, sister-in-law, for your teachings." Yi Li nodded. She glanced at Mo Xiaoyao and said softly, "Since I am married to the prince, we will share honor and disgrace in the future." "Good. Then I am relieved." Madame Wen nodded with relief. Yi Li frowned. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "Sister-in-law, you must be lonely living here alone. I don't know if you should return to the manor. It is not inappropriate for sister-in-law to cultivate in the manor." Madame Wen shook her head and said, "I am used to the peace here. I will not be used to going back." Yi Li persuaded again and again, but Madame Wen refused. She had no choice but to give up. After talking for a while, Madame Wen asked the two to stay for lunch. She said that she wanted to copy scriptures and asked Mo Xiaoyao to take Yi Li to walk around. Although Wuyuan Nunnery was a family temple, it was not small. Yi Li pushed Mo Xiaoyao through the quiet bamboo forest behind the nunnery. Because of Madame Wen, her mood was inevitably heavy. "Li, if it were you, you would not be like sister-in-law, right?" After a long time, Mo Xiaoyao asked in a low voice. Yi Li nodded. She suddenly remembered that Mo Xiaoyao could not see her movements and said, "I won't. I will try my best to live a better life." Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and said, "That is good. Sister-in-law is actually not suitable to be the king's princess consort. Our Mo family has wronged her. If it were not for the fact that elder brother wanted to avoid Mo Jingqi's suspicion, perhaps he would not have chosen Madame Wen, who was born in an ordinary scholarly family." Yi Li thought for a moment and said, "Perhaps sister-in-law does not regret it." Every time Madame Wen mentioned her husband, Yi Li could see a faint gentleness and reminiscence in her calm eyes. Perhaps Mo Xiaowen had chosen her for the king's mansion, but Madame Wen might have feelings for Mo Xiaowen, or Mo Xiaowen might have feelings for Madame Wen. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and said, "The king's mansion has never given her a chance to regret it. The Chu state did not forbid women who had lost their fathers from remarrying, but it was not so easy for widows in the king's mansion to remarry. Without enough courage to face the world, Madame Wen could not even think of making herself regret. But, Li, I allow you to regret it. Prince, tell me honestly, if you die, can I remarry?" Yi Li raised her brows and asked. Mo Xiaoyao did not object and nodded. "And, that is what I meant." Yi Li looked at the sky and rolled her eyes at a place where Mo Xiaoyao could not see. A wave of anger that came out of nowhere made her laugh coldly. "Then, does Prince want to die early, or do you want to die early?" She raised her brows at her strange words. Mo Xiaoyao smiled, "I still want to die peacefully." "Really? That's not good news. Move aside." Before Yi Li could finish her sentence, Mo Xiaoyao suddenly turned and pushed Yi Li away. Swoosh! 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 A burst of sound pierced through the air and 3 diamond-shaped darts that emitted a cold blue light were nailed to the bamboo beside Yili. Since you're here, why don't you come out and meet me? Mo Xiaoyao lowered his eyes and stared at the hand that was placed on the wheelchair armrest. Oh. Mo Xiaoyao, you're finally willing to come out of the king's mansion? I thought you would hide inside for the rest of your life and not dare to come out to meet people. A presumptuous laugh sounded and a tall figure appeared in the bamboo forest. Soon, a group of black-clothed people surrounded the 3 people in the middle. Mo Xiaoyao raised his head and looked at the person who came. The smile on his lips was as cold as snow. Do you dare to take off the veil on your face and say it again? Chapter 108. The incomer's laughter suddenly stopped. His gray eyes suddenly contracted. He snorted softly and turned to look at Yili standing at the side. This is Princess Ding. Yes, sir. I have not asked for your guidance, Yili said with a nod. Such courage, the man praised. He seemed to look regretfully at Yili and said, such a pity, Mo Xiaoyao, with such a woman buried with you, you should have no regrets, right? The man clearly did not want to waste words. He waved his hand and the frowning men in black immediately surrounded them. Take Wang Fei away first, Mo Xiaoyao ordered coolly. Several figures quickly flashed into the crowd. A Jin landed in front of Mo Xiaoyao with a long sword and looked warily at the surrounding men in black. 2 of the shadow guards landed beside Yili, one on her left and one on her right, wanting to send her away. The remaining people were already fighting with the men in black. Yili swept a glance. A Jin had only brought 7 or 8 people. She had taken away 2, so there were only 5 left. There were at least 20 to 30 assassins in black. Without time to think, Yili waved away the shadow guard who was pulling her and said, stay and help. Wang Fei. The shadow guard stilled and wanted to say something in disagreement. Yili had already lost her patience and walked past them. She casually took down an assassin who was trying to sneak up on her and said coldly, what are you talking about? Take care of these people first. As she spoke, she nimbly kicked away an attack from another. When she landed, she stepped on the body of the assassin who had just been put on the ground and was about to jump up. The assassin on the ground wailed and then fainted. The 2 shadow guards exchanged a look. They would follow Wang Fei's orders and take care of these assassins first. Even though they were well-trained shadow guards, they did not understand what move Wang Fei had used. However, this did not stop them from seeing Wang Fei block an assassin in 2 moves and stomp on another assassin until he fainted. If he was lucky, he would be bedridden for 3 to 5 months. If he was unlucky, he would be paralyzed for life. Yili's attack was successful, and her heart was at ease. Although Yili had a certain level of confidence in her skills, she had never been able to determine the depth of ancient martial arts. After all, in this era, she had never really encountered a situation that required her to use her full strength. Judging from Mr. Feng Yu's light body technique, he would not be easy to deal with. After all, in modern times, no matter how powerful you are, you can't fly everywhere. But fortunately, not everyone had young Master Feng Yu's light body technique of flying around. If it was only close combat, Yili felt that she could deal with most of the experts. These assassins clearly did not think that this seemingly harmless Princess Ding would be able to knock down one person in one move. By the time they regained their senses, the second person had been knocked down by Yili's elbow. Yili had learned many things in her previous life. She had learned martial arts, taekwondo, judo, and so on from a young age. Of course, she had many brothers and sisters at home, so she had plenty of fighting experience. After entering the army, especially the special forces, the direction of learning had changed from defeating the opponent to killing the opponent. Women were not as strong as men, so Yili's focus had always been on technique and speed. She wanted to kill the opponent in one move. Not to mention the women, even the men in the team did not dare to exchange blows with her. In the beginning, she was not very familiar with it. After knocking down 2 people, Yi gradually felt that the feeling of the past was slowly returning. The results of her unrelenting training over the years were showing. Otherwise, no matter how much combat experience Yi had and how many techniques she had, it would be useless if her body could not keep up. Wang, Princess Consort. Jin, who had been loyally guarding Imo Xiaoyao, couldn't help but be shocked speechless when he saw the scene. Was the person who had kicked an assassin taller than him until he spat out blood really the gentle and graceful Princess Consort? Jin vaguely remembered that one night, he seemed to have seen Princess Consort use some method to knock Prince Li unconscious. He had always thought that Princess Consort had used some hidden weapon. Now, it seemed that it was completely possible that she had used brute force. Yi Li. Imo Xiaoyao's voice rang out from behind her. At the same time, a sharp sword swung at her from behind. Yi Li hurriedly bent back and barely dodged the sword that was coming at her. At the same time, a dagger that had appeared in her hand at some unknown time swept across the wrist that was holding the sword. Then she grabbed that hand and used his standing posture to twist backwards. With a crack, the person's arm fell to the ground with his eyes open. Yi Li looked down in puzzlement. At some unknown time, a small knife had been stabbed into the person's back. The blade had been stabbed into the flesh and only the handle was left outside. Clearly, he had been killed with one blow. Yi Li raised an eyebrow. She quickly dodged the entanglements of the assassins and came to Imo Xiaoyao's side. Imo Xiaoyao said with a frown, "Didn't I tell you to leave first?" Yi Li and Jin were on guard against the surrounding assassins. She said, "What if we encounter another group of people when we go out? Will Dasa be fine?" "Someone has gone to protect Dasa." Imo Xiaoyao said indifferently, "There are many mechanisms in Wuyu Nunnery. If those people had barged into Wuyu Nunnery first, we would have discovered them long ago." In this short period of time, more than half of the 20 over assassins had fallen. The man who had been standing at the side watching sneered, "The shadow guard of Ding King's palace is indeed worthy of their reputation. It's a pity that there are too few of them." The man suddenly jumped up and the long sword in his hand quickly stabbed towards Imo Xiaoyao. Jin immediately went forward with his sword to block him. The two of them had exchanged more than 10 blows in an instant. But Jin was only a youth in his teens. With a moment of carelessness, he was knocked away by the man's arrow. A hideous bloody wound was left on his right arm. The man did not pay attention to Jin. After dodging his sword, he immediately turned towards Imo Xiaoyao again. Jin cried out in alarm. He wanted to get up to save him but he was held back by the two assassins behind him. "Li, move aside." Imo Xiaoyao pushed Yi Li away. At the same time, he moved his wheelchair backwards. After dodging the first sword, an even fiercer second sword came right after. A person sitting in a wheelchair who was unable to move was naturally not as nimble as a person standing. Imo Xiaoyao turned his head and stabbed his sword into the back of the wheelchair. At the same time, Imo Xiaoyao suddenly stretched out a hand to pinch the blade of the sword. With a slight movement of his sleeve, a bunch of concealed weapons flew towards the man. The man was startled. He quickly withdrew his sword and quickly retreated a few feet away to avoid the concealed weapons that were flying towards him. The man sneered and once again rushed forward. He had clearly seen that Imo Xiaoyao's greatest weakness was that he was unable to move. No matter how great his ability was, no matter how many concealed weapons he had, there would be a time when he ran out of them. Imo Xiaoyao did not dodge anymore. With a schwa sound, a long whip flew out. The distance between the two of them was pulled apart. For a moment, neither of them could do anything to the other. Yi Li stood at the side and was not in a hurry. From time to time, she would help take care of someone who wanted to sneak attack Imo Xiaoyao. At the same time, she stared at that person, trying to figure out his weakness. Finally, when Imo Xiaoyao's long whip wrapped around the man's sword, Yi Li sneered. She pulled out the golden hairpin on her head and threw it at the man's wrist. The moment the man was forced to let go of his sword, she rushed forward and mercilessly attacked the man's vital points with her dagger. Yi Li's moves were definitely vicious even if one looked at all the martial arts manuals. In just 3 to 5 moves, the man's right arm and left shoulder had been stabbed. Yi Li snorted in dissatisfaction. She ignored the man's right hand and stabbed the dagger into the man's chest. The man's expression changed. His right hand quickly and fiercely slapped towards Yi Li. At this time, it was too late for Yi Li to retreat. Suddenly, the slender tail of the whip wrapped around Yi Li's waist and she was quickly pulled back by a force. Yi Li smoothly avoided the man's right hand and landed steadily in front of Emo Xiaoyao. Chapter 109. Not far away, the man's face was ashen white. He gritted his teeth as blood poured from the wound in his chest. When he had been pulled away by Emo Xiaoyao's long whip, Yi Li had taken the opportunity to twist the dagger in his chest. The sharp dagger had turned half a circle in his chest before being pulled out. At this time, there was a bloody hole in his chest that couldn't be covered. Yi Li looked down at the dagger in her hand and frowned in dissatisfaction. This dagger was trash compared to her favorite tri-edged bayonet. Cough cough, such a good ding country Wang Fei. I didn't think that you had hidden your skills so well. The man pressed on the wound in his chest and coughed before speaking in a raspy voice. I won't attack if people don't attack me. Yi Li stared at him and said coldly. It's my loss today. Emo Xiaoyao, you're lucky today to have married such a powerful Wang Fei. The man glanced at his subordinates, who had been taken care of, and knew that the assassination had failed on the verge of success. Even if there were still 7 or 8 of them, his subordinates could not match the shadow guard of the Ding country Wang Fu if they had the same number of subordinates. However, you can dodge once or twice, but you can't dodge 8 or 10 times. Emo Xiaoyao, do you know how many people want your life? Ha ha. I'll wait for you underground. Finishing, the man gave up on Emo Xiaoyao and Yi Li. He shouted harshly, give up the mission, retreat. Then as the other assassins retreated, they blocked the path of the shadow guard that wanted to chase. In the end, they were killed by one of them. Chase. Emo Xiaoyao shook his head and said, don't chase a cornered enemy. Let's go back first. The shadow guard that wanted to chase immediately stopped in their tracks. Under Ajin's orders, they checked the assassins on the ground. Ajin ignored the wound on his right arm and tightly gripped his sword. Wang Fei, you're very strong. Yi Li shook her head, I was just lucky. Although he had won that battle easily, if not for Emo Xiaoyao's help, he would have been seriously injured even if he had been able to defeat the assassin. In the end, whether it was strength or agility, he was still lacking. There were a few times when he clearly hit that person, but because of the lack of strength, it was not enough to cause significant damage. Furthermore, even if he found the opponent's weakness, he would not be able to succeed because his speed was not fast enough. Very powerful, Ajin can't beat him. Ajin insisted. Yi Li smiled and said, if I can't deal with him in a quarter of an hour, I'll be the one to die. Wang Fei is very powerful. Can Ajin learn martial arts from Wang Fei? Ajin was a stubborn child and stared at Yi Li. If he was as powerful as Wang Fei, there would be no need for the prince to make a move. Emo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li with a complicated expression and said, I thought that Miss Li only knew how to protect herself, but it seems that I was wrong. Miss Li is always able to surprise me. He had seen how Yi Li had fought the assassin. That gaze and the cleanliness of her attacks were not things that normal women could achieve. Even many of the shadow guard were not as decisive and vicious as her. He was certain that even if 3 shadow guards attacked her at the same time, it may not be Yi Li who lost. But Emo Xiaoyao could not understand. Yi Li had been raised in a boudoir from a young age, how could she have such skills? Those who did not know would think that this was a person who was used to fighting on the battlefield, and not a daughter of a prestigious family. Yi Li smiled faintly and was not in a hurry to explain herself, as long as the prince does not feel that it is a shock. Emo Xiaoyao looked at her for a long time. Finally, he sighed and asked, Miss Li, are you really the Yi family's 3rd miss and the Su family's granddaughter? Yi Li said, naturally. Then. Wait until you want to say it. Yi Li was stunned. She looked at Imo Xiaoyao and did not say anything for a long time. With Imo Xiaoyao and the Ding King's palace's situation, to be able to say such words made her feel very surprised. After a while, Yi Li said in a low voice, "Although I cannot tell you right now, I can guarantee that I am Yi Li. Moreover, I did not marry into the Ding King's palace with any motive." "I believe you. Aren't we husband and wife?" Imo Xiaoyao said in a low voice. "Many thanks." Yi Li's heart felt warm as she said in a low voice. It wasn't that she didn't think about what she would do if she was discovered. Originally, she thought that she would first learn martial arts from the master Imo Xiaoyao found and then slowly get used to it. Actually, this seemed very unreliable. At least she wasn't sure if she could hide it from Imo Xiaoyao. If she aroused Imo Xiaoyao's suspicions, then it would be even more troublesome. Now, it saved her a lot of trouble. No matter what, at least Imo Xiaoyao was willing to believe in her. No matter how much he believed, it was already much better than what she had originally expected. "Miss Li, be careful." While she was lost in thought, she suddenly heard Imo Xiaoyao's voice. Yi Li suddenly turned around and a sleeve arrow shot towards her. The dagger in Yi Li's hand instantly flew out. A clear shadow moved in front of her and a figure pushed her to the ground. "Imo Xiaoyao." Yi Li hesitantly called out. She raised her hand to support Imo Xiaoyao's back and instantly felt wet. Imo Xiaoyao powerlessly fell beside her and said with a faint smile, "I'm fine." "Prince." Jin rushed over to help Imo Xiaoyao up. Imo Xiaoyao's face was deathly pale as he frowned and said, "I'm fine. See if there are any survivors." Yi Li sat up and looked in front of her. The person who had just shot the sleeve arrow had already fallen to the ground, dead. And that person was the person she had knocked unconscious before. She didn't know when he had woken up. She couldn't help but bitterly laugh in her heart. After leaving the battlefield for so long, did she forget what it meant to be vigilant? She had actually left several survivors in this kind of battle. No. In reality, other than the last one, she hadn't killed a single one. If these people woke up at some unknown time, she couldn't help but shiver. A slightly warm hand covered her hand. Imo Xiaoyao looked at her and said with a faint smile, "Miss Li, I'm fine." Yi Li lightly bit her lips and said hatefully, "You're injured and you're fine. Then how can you be fine?" Letting Jin support Imo Xiaoyao, Yi Li got up and took back her dagger to wipe it clean. Then she tore the clothes on his back and checked that the blood flowing out was normal. There should be no poison on the arrow. She was slightly relieved. Imo Xiaoyao said in a low voice, "I'm fine as long as I'm not dead." Yi Li gritted her teeth and waved her hand to let Jin and the people beside her take him back to the Wuyuan nunnery. Without her order, the shadow guard had already flown away. He must have gone to find a doctor. When they returned to the Wuyuan nunnery, as Imo Xiaoyao said, there were no assassins in the Wuyuan nunnery. Wen had been waiting for them at the door after receiving the news. Seeing a group of people coming back, they hurried to welcome them and led them to the prepared guest room. Although Imo Xiaoyao's injury didn't look serious now, Yi Li had just checked that the assassin's sleeve arrows were all barbed. She could imagine how bloody the arrows would be when they were taken out later. Worried that Wen would be frightened, Yi Li asked Wen to go back to the room to have a rest. Wen looked at her and still went to prepare food for them with a worried look. Chapter 110. Imo Xiaoyao sat on the bed. Because of the wound on his back, he occasionally frowned. Yi Li asked worriedly, "Is it very uncomfortable?" "The doctor will be here soon." Imo Xiaoyao grimaced and said, "The doctor will only come to take the arrow. Let Jin do it. He should be more efficient than the other doctors." Yi Li frowned and looked sideways at Jin. "Does he know how to take the arrow? This arrow has a hook. If it was a normal arrow, and it did not hit a vital point, he could just pull it out. But an arrow with a hook was very difficult to pull out. If he forcefully pulled it out, a large piece of flesh would be torn off. Ajin shook his head with a serious expression. Mo Xiaoyao was helpless. If the arrow pierced through, it would have been much easier. Yili looked at him coldly and couldn't help but mock. If it was 2 inches lower, it would have been much easier. Li, are you angry? Mo Xiaoyao sighed and looked at her with a gentle gaze. It was as if the person with an arrow in his back was not him. Yili lowered her head in annoyance. A moment later, she calmed down and said, Sorry, I am angry at myself. If she had not been careless and underestimated the enemy, if she had not been so lost in her thoughts, Mo Xiaoyao would not have been injured at all. After so many years of living a comfortable life, her vigilance had deteriorated to such a degree. If this had been on the battlefield in the past, it would have been enough for her, Yili, to die 17 or 18 times. Sure enough, the doctor came very quickly because he was dragged over by his collar. This doctor was very brave. After being dragged all the way to the ground, he still had the courage to examine Mo Xiaoyao's wound without a change in expression. After examining the wound, the doctor took the arrow that Yili had brought back and looked at it for a moment. Then he said, either this old man uses a knife to cut open the wound and take the arrow out, or poke it in a bit and take it out from the chest. What do you think? The back. Take it out from the front. Yili and Mo Xiaoyao said in unison. They couldn't help but glance at each other. Yili looked away as if nothing had happened and asked, Doctor, what do you think? The doctor nodded in satisfaction and said, Both of you have made a wise choice. Although it seems painful to remove the arrow like this, it will only hurt for a short while. Using a knife to slowly cut open the flesh requires a slow grinding process. Moreover, the healing process will be slow. Yili supported Mo Xiaoyao as she looked at the doctor, who was skillfully preparing, and asked, Doctor, you seem to be very good at this kind of arrow wound. The doctor replied without raising his head, This old man used to be a military doctor. So that was the case. She watched as the doctor cleaned the arrowhead's tail, then mercilessly held the arrowhead's tail and pushed it forward. Mo Xiaoyao's body tensed up in an instant, his hand tightly gripping Yili's arm. Yili didn't say a word as she supported him. She watched as the doctor wrapped a sturdy strap around the exposed barbed arrowhead and pulled. A spray of blood flew out. The entire sleeve arrow left Mo Xiaoyao's chest. The doctor took the strong wine from the side and cleaned the wound. Then he skillfully bandaged it with white cloth. Only then did he raise his head and wipe away the sweat on his forehead, saying, It's fine, it didn't hurt any vital parts or bones. Just change it every day and rest for a while. Yili looked at the blood in the basin next to her, and the pile of bloody gauze on the ground, asking, What do you need to take? Something to replenish the blood? The doctor disdainfully twisted his mouth, saying, The prince is still young, his body isn't weak. Princess, if you are really worried, you can stew something like 4 substances soup, angelica soup to replenish the blood, or red dates soup. Seeing the doctor leave behind a few prescriptions for external use and swagger away with his medicine box, Yili felt a little embarrassed. Why did she feel that the soup that the doctor mentioned was for women? This doctor has a personality. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly, saying, He is the special doctor in our mansion. He used to be a military doctor of the Black Cloud Cavalry. Mo Xiaoyao was injured, so when asked them to stay in Weiyue Temple to recuperate, they would return to the capital when they got better. However, Mo Xiaoyao refused, and Yili didn't oppose. Since those killers dared to openly assassinate Mo Xiaoyao near the capital, they definitely wouldn't give up after failing once. Since one had made up her mind to stay out of worldly affairs, they would only bring unnecessary danger to her if they stayed here. When the shadow guard sent by the Prince Ding mansion arrived, Mo Xiaoyao left some shadow guard to protect Wen, and returned to the capital with Yili. Prince Ding was seriously injured near the capital, which was naturally not a trivial matter. However, Mo Xiaoyao seemed to have ordered people to block the news. After they returned to the capital, the dignitaries in the capital didn't seem to know that Mo Xiaoyao was injured. Anyway, Mo Xiaoyao didn't need to go to court every day like ordinary people. He just recuperated at home when he had nothing to do. However, there was one thing that made them quite helpless. As soon as they returned to the mansion, Nanny Sun directly sent Mo Xiaoyao to Yili's courtyard on the grounds that Prince needed personal care because of his injury. Nanny Lin, Nanny Wei, and Director Mo were naturally happy to see this. They excitedly directed the servants to move Mo Xiaoyao's things into the new room. They were so happy that they seemed to forget that their master had just been seriously injured by an assassin. Because everyone in the mansion worked hard together, Yili had to take on the task of changing Mo Xiaoyao's medicine every day. Even though Yili used to be a soldier who had gone through fire and water, she still felt shocked when she saw the scars on Mo Xiaoyao's body. Not only were there knife wounds on his chest and back, but there were also some sword wounds. It was hard to connect this body with Mo Xiaoyao's image of a gentle young master. Yili finally understood what Mo Xiaoyao meant when he said, "I'm fine as long as I don't die." To be able to survive such a serious injury, he must have experienced a narrow escape from death that normal people couldn't imagine. Every time she applied medicine and saw this man smiling calmly at her, Yili couldn't help but feel a faint throbbing pain in her heart. However, she wasn't someone who liked to be conflicted. She quickly attributed this strange feeling to Mo Xiaoyao being injured because of her. She quickly immersed herself in the process of making up for it. Yili rejected Mo Xiaoyao's previous suggestion of hiring a skilled swordsmanship master for her. Instead, apart from handling the mansion's affairs and taking care of Mo Xiaoyao, she spent the rest of her time in the mansion's secret training grounds. It was a very focused training of her strength and speed. At the same time, she also trained in a certain type of internal energy that Mo Xiaoyao recommended. However, Yili knew that internal energy wasn't something that could be achieved overnight. As for the rumors of internal energy being able to split rocks and mountains at its strongest, Yili didn't understand. Why would she want to use her own hands to split rocks and mountains? If she could recover to her peak state, she could break a person's bones with one punch even without internal energy. What made Yili satisfied was that this body's potential wasn't bad. In Mo Xiaoyao's words, this body could be considered a good material for practicing martial arts. Thus, Yili spent most of her time in the training grounds every day. The original training grounds in the mansion had been changed by her quite a bit. Since only she and Mo Xiaoyao used it, Mo Xiaoyao didn't care how she changed it or how she practiced. He would only occasionally go to the training grounds to watch her practice when he had nothing to do. On the other hand, Ajin couldn't forget Yili's skills after seeing her fight. Every time he was by Mo Xiaoyao's side, he would stare at Yili and Qing Shuang and Qing Luan who were practicing with Yili. He was just short of begging Wang Fei to take him as a disciple. Chapter 111. Mo Xiaoyao also came from a military background. In the beginning, he didn't see the benefits of Yili's training, but as time passed, he began to see. Seeing Ajin looking pitifully at the three figures in the training field, Mo Xiaoyao couldn't help but speak up for him. Yili only smiled when she heard this. "Right now, I'm only doing recovery training. The most important thing is to train my strength, speed, and endurance. There's no secret to it. It's just that Ajin doesn't have much time because he's with you every day." The word recovery made Mo Xiaoyao raise his eyebrows slightly. He smiled faintly. "Does Li think that after this kind of training, you can fight against martial arts experts?" Yili shrugged helplessly. She took the handkerchief Mo Xiaoyao handed to her and wiped her sweat. "Each has its own advantages and disadvantages. The most important thing about my method is that it doesn't take much time and it doesn't have high requirements for one's aptitude and comprehension. Using the Nigong technique you gave me as an example, without considering aptitude and comprehension, even if I train for 20 hours a day, how long would it take to succeed?" Mo Xiaoyao was deep in thought. Yili looked at him with a smile and said, "My training, even though I can't train you to become a martial arts expert, but at most 1 year, I can make a healthy person's body reach its peak. If I focus on the various skills, a martial arts expert only has one life." Mo Xiaoyao understood that there were many people with good bodies, but there weren't many martial arts experts. Therefore, not everyone with good bodies could become an expert. Yi Li clearly wanted to find another way, bypassing Nigong and martial arts. She wanted to make a person strong. Li's way of thinking is very special. I look forward to Li's results. Mo Xiaoyao smiled. Many thanks. Yi Li smiled. She didn't mind revealing some things to Mo Xiaoyao because only Mo Xiaoyao could provide her with what she needed. In the entire Fu, the only two people who were dissatisfied with Yi Li's obsession with martial arts were Mother Lin and Mother Wei. It was clear that the two mamas couldn't understand why the elegant and graceful young miss would like to play with swords and spears after marrying into the Ding King's Fu. They even tried to persuade Yi Li that women should be gentle and quiet and that if she was too strong, the prince wouldn't like her. When the nagging Yi Li heard the two mamas, she wanted to turn around and run. Mo Xiaoyao looked like he was watching a joke and didn't say anything, allowing Yi Li to be bombarded by the two nannies. Prince, Wang Fei. Li Wang Fu sent an invitation. Chief Steward Mo personally handed over a red and golden dragon and phoenix wedding invitation. Yi Li reached out to take it and raised her eyebrows. Li Wang is welcoming Princess Lingyun as his consort. Chief Steward Mo also knew that the currently Wang Fei was his Wang Fei's blood-related younger sister and explained, Li Wang Fu sent an invitation saying that he is marrying Princess Lingyun as his equal consort. These few days, because of Mo Xiaoyao's injury in Yi Li's own matters, she didn't pay attention to things that didn't concern her. Yi Li almost forgot about Princess Lingyun and Princess Xixia's marriage and asked curiously, then. Princess Xixia really entered the palace? Chief Steward Mo reported, Princess Xixia is currently living in Zhaoyang Grand Princess Fu. The Emperor and Empress Dowager's intention seems to be to pick a good day to welcome Princess Xixia into the palace in August. But the title has already been announced. The Emperor has already conferred Princess Xixia as consort Xia. As for Princess Lingyun, because Shitzi Genom of Gojoseon is about to leave for Xiling, the wedding is a bit rushed. What Chief Steward Mo didn't say was that although Princess Lingyun was the equal consort was different from the wife consort. Naturally, she didn't need to spend so much time preparing like the wife consort. When is the wedding banquet? Mo Xiaoyao asked. 3 days later. Mo Xiaoyao nodded, saying, I know. Chief Steward, go prepare a gift for I and Wang Fei. Chief Steward Mo said with some hesitation, Prince means to attend the wedding? The prince had just been assassinated and it was worrying to attend the wedding. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly, I can't not go out for such a small matter, right? Go prepare. Yes. Chief Steward Mo quickly responded and left. Not only did he have to prepare Prince Li's gift, but he also had to carefully arrange the guards and shadow guard around the prince and Wang Fei to ensure that nothing went wrong. Seeing Chief Steward Mo leave in a hurry, Yi Li sighed helplessly. She looked at Mo Xiaoyao and said, I don't know why, but I feel that the peaceful days are about to disappear. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows, asking, you like peaceful days? Yi Li nodded, it's best to be peaceful, to live a smooth life until old age, and then to die in bed without any regrets. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head, then why do you still practice martial arts? Mo Xiaoyao always felt that Yi Li was an extremely contradictory person. Although she appeared to be elegant and refined like a noble lady, but from the very beginning, she gave him an impression that she was different from an ordinary noble lady. Sometimes, she was even more like a general's daughter than Murong Ting. Occasionally, the sharpness that flashed across her brows was not something that an ordinary woman could show. Yi Li sighed, just take it that I like to be vigilant in times of peace. No matter how much she told herself that she wanted to live a peaceful life like a noble lady, but Yi Li was clear in her heart that it was impossible for her to be like Wen Shi and completely hand over her life to others. She could give in to her father's differential treatment, she could give in to all the cumbersome rules that she was not used to, and she could even give in to her own marriage. But she could never give in to Yi Li's nature. She could not let herself become a weak woman who did not know how to rely on others and did not even have the strength to protect herself. There were many things that she had prepared that she might not need in her lifetime, but she would rather put them there for her entire life than to find that she did not have them when she needed them. If Li doesn't like those trivial matters outside, You don't have to care about them. Mo Xiaoyao said, there will be people below to take care of those things. Moreover, Ding King's Fu does not need too much human relations. Yi Li understood. The Ding King's Fu had been quiet for so many years, which was exactly what that person in the palace wanted. These years, the Ding King's Fu's prestige in the Dechu state had been slowly suppressed. If she, the newly appointed Ding King's Fu, was too active now, it would make the emperor afraid. Thinking of this, Yi Li's mind suddenly flashed. She abruptly raised her head to look at Mo Xiaoyao and asked, why did Nanzhao and Xiling suddenly form a marriage alliance with the Dechu state? The reason that she had told Princess Lingyun before was just to deceive a child. Xiling and the Dechu state seemed to be destined enemies. It was good enough that the Dechu state did not take advantage of Xiling's calamity to loot the burning house. How could it be solved by a mere princess who was engaged in a political marriage? Mo Xiaoyao's eyes flashed slightly, and he said lightly, Nanzhao is just in passing. The one who really wants to form a marriage alliance with the Dechu state is Xiling. Yi Li lowered her eyes. She only felt that the thoughts in her mind were spinning very quickly, and she could not grasp any clues at the moment. After a while, she raised her head to ask, if another war breaks out in the Dechu state, what will happen to the Ding King's Fu? Chapter 112. Mo Xiaoyao was startled and a trace of undetectable sorrow flashed past his eyes. After a long time, he said in a low voice, the Ding King's household no longer has anyone who can fight. In less than 5 years, the Ding King's household's 100 years of fame will be annihilated. The common people were always forgetful. Even if the Ding King's household had once protected the Dechu state for hundreds of years, even if the Dechu state was like a god of war in their eyes, once the war broke out again and the Ding King's household was powerless, they would not remember their past glory and would only remember their incompetence. However, the Ding King's household could not blame them because they were not in the wrong. Northern Militant. In the study room, after a long silence, Yi Li's voice faintly sounded. Looking at Mo Xiaoyao's expressionless face, she sighed softly. Wasn't it good for everyone to live peacefully in the world? Why did they have to drag the common people into the merciless flames of war for some completely unnecessary reasons? Yi Li felt that she would never be able to understand the thoughts of those in power. Yi Li suddenly felt that this man was very pitiful. He should have been high-spirited and vigorous like his ancestors, pointing out the country and living a carefree life. However, he could only use his youthful appearance to turn the tide when his elder brother suddenly passed away. As early as when he was 18 years old, he had already given up everything he could to protect the Ding King's household's 100 years of fame. After losing his healthy body and handsome appearance, he still had to carefully face the spying and scheming from all sides, as well as the assassination that would come at any time. As intelligent as he was, perhaps he had already seen the future of the Ding King's household. It was just that he was unwilling and could not admit defeat. Can we retreat? Yi Li asked. However, the moment the words left her mouth, she was annoyed at her own childishness. Since ancient times, how many of those who were powerful enough to shake their masters were able to retreat unscathed? Mo Xiaoyao lightly said, Mo Xiaoyao can retreat. Where can the 800,000 Mahist army and 50,000 Black Cloud cavalry retreat? Yi Li was silent. The people of the Mo family, such as the previous regent Mo Lufang, and even the previous masters of the Mo family would not be more stupid than her. There weren't many masters in the Ding King's residence. Of course, they could just leave. The world was so big, where could they not go? However, the hundreds of thousands of soldiers who were loyal to the Mo family and the Ding Palace would not leave so easily. When the Dechu state was in trouble, it needed them. When the country was at peace, each of them became a thorn in the emperor's side. Once the master of the Ding King's residence left, the best outcome for them would be to be broken up and suppressed. No one dared to imagine an even worse outcome. Sometimes, in the eyes of an emperor, hundreds of thousands of soldiers might not even be comparable to a chess piece in his hand. If the northern tribes really reignites the flames of war, what do you plan to do? Yi Li asked. Mo Xiaoyao looked at her and said calmly, "Lead the troops into battle. Li, I will send you to Yunzhou when the time comes. With Mr. Qin Yun here, no one would dare to do anything to you. If it were me, the imperial family would not dare to touch you." Yi Li frowned. She suddenly felt that it was a bit ridiculous. They were originally discussing Mo Jingli's marriage. Why did they suddenly run to this kind of thing? Clearly, there wasn't even a shadow of it. But the faint uneasiness in her heart told her that the conversation just now was not her imagination. Even if her brain was damaged, Mo Xiaoyao would not be damaged with her. Turning her face to ignore Mo Xiaoyao's words, Yi Li nonchalantly changed the topic. "Li Wang is going to marry an equal consort. Should I make a trip back to the Yi family?" Without needing Yi Li to think, a steward came to report to the Yi family before noon. Old Madam invited Wang Fei to return to the Yi family to discuss something. Returning to the Yi Fu, Yi Li was directly invited into Old Madam Ye's courtyard. The moment she stepped into Rong Le Hall, she saw Yi Li's red and swollen eyes from crying and Wang Shi's angry screams. Old Madam Yi and Minister Yi were also sitting with a gloomy expression. Yi Li curled her lips and understood what was going on. "Grandmother, father." Li. Old Madam Yi saw Yi Li come in and her eyes lit up. She hurriedly beckoned for Yi Li to come forward. Yi Li's mouth twitched. She was silent inside. Old Madam didn't think that she could control the Emperor's marriage right. She was just a Princess Ding. Don't talk about Li Wang marrying a princess. Even if he wanted to take a concubine, she couldn't control it. "Li, you're finally back. Look at your sister. Really has a hard life." Yi Li walked forward and glanced at Yi Ying, who was crying in Wang Shi's arms. She sat down next to Old Madam Yi and asked, "Fourth sister, what's wrong?" Old Madam Yi said anxiously, Was married for less than a month and Li Wang is going to marry an equal concubine. Where will our minister's manor's face go? How will your sister live in the future?" Yi Li nodded and said, "Our prince also received the invitation from Li Wang Manor just now. At this time, fourth sister isn't in the manor taking care of matters. Why did she come back?" Wang Shi glared and said angrily, "What did you say? Is already like this and you still blame her for coming home? Yi Li, are you still human? Old master, you see." "Shut up." Old Madam Yi glared at Wang Shi and said angrily, "Li is right. Just now, this old woman has been talking to you for a long time. Did you turn a deaf ear to it? Li Wang Manor is now taking care of the marriage. If the princess, doesn't come out to take care of it, how will others see it?" Wang Shi said with dissatisfaction. "Li Wang let down and still wants to take care of the marriage for him. Is there any justice in this?" Old Madam Yi sneered and said, "The emperor's words are justice. You were also present on the night of the marriage decree. Why didn't you come out to take a look? Don't come up with those bad ideas." Beside Yi Ying's mind was still thinking about the conversation with Mo Xiaoyao in the morning. How could she be in the mood to listen to them at this time? She patiently persuaded Yi Ying, but Yi Ying didn't appreciate it. With tears in her eyes, she hugged Wang Shi and cried, sob. "Father, it's all your fault. Why did you insist on marrying me to Li Wang? If not, how could your daughter be wrong today? This should be her, Minister Yi patiently growled and glared at Yi Ying with a gloomy face. Yi Ying couldn't help but hide in Wang Shi's arms with a gloomy face that had never been seen before. She sobbed with grievance. Yi Li silently looked down and concealed the fluctuation in her eyes. So it was not Yi Ying's idea to hook up with Mo Jingli in the beginning? Then, what did her father mean by letting one of his daughters hook up with another daughter's fiancé? Well, it's already like this. What's the use of saying this? Minister Yi impatiently waved his hand and looked at Yi Li. What do you think? Yi Li suppressed the doubts in her heart, raised her head and said indifferently, "It's difficult to follow the emperor's orders. Besides, it's related to the diplomatic relations between the two countries. I'm afraid there's no room for discussion." Minister Yi frowned and said, "Are we just going to let it go? If it's a lowly one, it's fine. But that's the princess of Xiling Kingdom." Yili smiled faintly and said, "It's because she's the princess of Xiling that we don't have to worry, right? Father." Minister Yi pondered for a moment and his brows gradually relaxed. He said, "That's right. Li Wang's future successor can't have the bloodline of the Emperor of Xiling. Besides, the Princess of Xiling put on such a show in the palace that day. I'm afraid that Li Wang has some grudges against her. As long as Her can control the power in the residence, we don't have to worry about a princess who's married for peace."